It's time for TWiT This Week in Tech. What a panel I got today. Alex Kantrowitz from the Big Technology Podcast is here, and legendary author and historian Stephen Levy, editor-at-large at Wired Magazine. We, of course, will talk about the AI apocalypse. Is it good news or bad news? The end of the line for TikTok. And then we'll take a trip into the desert with Stephen and Palmer Luckey. It's all coming up next on TWiT.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Tech, episode 919, recorded Sunday, March 19th, 2023. Hallucinating Bagels. This Week in Tech is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Good sleep is the ultimate game changer, and the pod cover is the ultimate sleep machine. Go to 8sleep.com/TWiT to check out the pod cover and save $150 at checkout. 8 Sleep currently ships within the U.S., Canada, the U.K., select countries in the EU, and Australia. And by Mint Mobile. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2023, switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save this year. Get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free at mintmobile.com/TWiT. And by Miro. Miro is your team's visual platform to connect, collaborate, and create together. Tap into a way to map processes, systems, and plans with the whole team and get your first 3 boards for free to start creating your best work yet at Miro.com/podcast. And by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/TWiT and book a demo today. It's time for TWiT This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news. And I have a really great panel for you today. Alex Kantrowitz is here, host of the Big Technology Podcast. He does the Big Technology newsletter, all at bigtechnology.com. And always a welcome guy. Your book, I see it right behind you. Is that your book? Usually you have it right
it's
behind
different,
you.
a bunch of different variations
Japanese
of it. We
now?
have
Yeah.
English, Korean, and
Nice.
a bunch of other languages. So
That's
here's a
awesome.
couple.
Congratulations.
Yes, excited about it.
Yeah, that's really great.
And the title is always Day One, if anybody's interested.
It's always Day One, buddy. Based, of course, on Jeff Bezos' famous dictum that it should always be Day One at Amazon. It's about Day 8 now, I think, at Amazon, actually. But we'll talk about
We're
that.
deeper into the day.
Yes,
the
much
days
deeper.
than we have been.
Yeah.
Also
Yes.
with us, somebody who covers technology day to day, but is also perhaps the preeminent historian of our culture, Mr. Stephen Levy. He's an editor-at-large at Wired, author of a book on Facebook, The Inside Story. Spent 3 years embedded at Facebook to write that, did the same for Google. But, of course, if you haven't read Hackers, the original history of the original geeks, you are not up to date on what tech is all about. It's the must read. Stephen, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Leo. It's happy to be on.
Both from New York, so expect to hear a lot of sirens during the show today. It's always, I don't know if that's Brooklyn or Manhattan. I'm not sure which, but
We're off the street in this place, but we did just have the Brooklyn half marathon run by us this morning, which
there
was
you go.
interesting. But that seems to be done.
there you go.
You will get a siren from me.
Both of you have been covering, yeah, I know. Both of you have been covering tech for a long time. And I'm I'll wait. Is that you, Alex?
No, it's not me. I'm off
It must
the
be
street.
Stephen. Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't even a loud one, really.
It sounded like the end of the world, to be honest with you. I feel like
Well,
aliens
maybe
are landing now. Oh my gosh. You get used to that, Stephen? Like you don't even hear it anymore, probably.
No. Just, yeah.
I love it. You've been covering tech for a long time, as have I. And one of the questions, of course, when you're covering day-to-day on tech, you always have to ask is this the next big thing, or is this just another 3D television? You know, is it about to change the world or not? And boy, that question comes up a lot for me with what's been going on in AI. So I think I've got two people with some great perspective to talk about that. This was kind of a wild week. ChatGPT-4 was released by OpenAI, immediately incorporated into Microsoft's version of Bing Chat. And I would say, based on Twitter alone, there are about 500 new startups that are going to be using ChatGPT in some form or fashion. One of the new features is you can take an image and give it to ChatGPT-4, and it will do something with it. Immediately, somebody showed how you could do literally a sketch on the back of a napkin of a website, feed it to ChatGPT-4, and get a working JavaScript, HTML, CSS website. I've seen it now write code, malware, as well as good stuff. It's kind of remarkable. So this I would say the last 3 months have been, looked like anyway, the elbow on the hockey stick when it comes to AI. But I bet both of you have another take, given your history. Let's start with Stephen. What is this? I ask everybody this now. Is it a parlor trick, or is it the next big thing?
I think it's more the latter.
Really?
Yeah, I think, as you say, I've been around for a while. When I started writing about technology, it was the explosion of PCs. That was just beginning to slip into the mainstream. It was a gold rush time. And there's only been a couple really similar explosions since. There was mobile, before then the internet, right? So then internet and mobile, each one built on the previous one. And I think this AI, this inflection point of AI, because AI has been getting better and better, and it's had these jumps. Most recently in around the mid 2000s, when deep learning became a thing and AI became much more useful than it had previously. And I think now, in terms of the way it communicates with humans and does this output, this generative content, it is going to open the door to things that even people who make it can't imagine. And that's really the signature of those previous revolutions, if you want to call them.
But you have also, if you've lived through this, lived through AI winters as well.
Yeah. I mean, I did a column. I think my first column this year was the "Welcome to the Hot AI Summer," hot wet AI summer. Yeah,
but it comes after summer.
Well, and I said that that we're going to get thousands of startups built on APIs from.
I think we got that many this week alone.
Yeah. So it's and it is something that's real and something that's going to make a difference. Something that's going to put people to work and put people out of work. And it's in GPT-4, which came out this week, is going to have a lot of numbers in the next few months and years. So we see what a big leap it was from 3 to 3.5 to 4, which was secretly in Bing. And they're working on, I'm sure, 5, 6 and on from now on. And, you saw it was like the greatest leap in LSAT coaching ever, because 3.5 would only be like a mediocre law student who, passed the LSAT or got, did enough of the LSAT, maybe not get into one of the better schools. And 4, all of a sudden, you've got someone who was a really sharp student taking the LSAT. This could get into Columbia.
Got into the 90th percentile on the
right.
It's remarkable. It got better SAT scores than I did.
Well, by 6, that there won't be anywhere to go. There'll be 100%. Yeah. And so, what does that mean for the LSAT and for lawyers?
Yeah. But at the same time, you could also take that as maybe an indictment of those tests as perhaps being too rote, too much requiring memorization. I mean, it's for sure that if you had access to the entire corpus of the internet, there's plenty of tests you could pass. And of course, ChatGPT has that. Alex, are you equally bullish on the future of AI?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on it. And yes, of course, our education system has long been a failure in terms of the, memorize and spit back nature. So I'm not very impressed that it's passing tests that are, ultimately inadequate for really assessing the ability to learn and to think in the academic world. It's a longer conversation, but I do think that this is a big step forward. You talked about it as the elbow of the hockey stick. That might be one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is just a continuum on a long era of research that we've had and breakthroughs that have come bit by bit. And the thing with AI technology is it looks like it's going slowly or there's been nothing, and then big advances come out of nowhere because someone finds an interesting way to package it to someone, and then you get the demo and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I think the real tell here and the real interesting thing about it is that there's a real use case, right? Like how much oxygen and ink was expended talking about how crypto was going to revolutionize the tech world and revolutionize the world. And most people haven't ever used it for anything practical in their entire lives. Whereas you put some of this technology and you package it as a chatbot, and all of a sudden you get 100 million users overnight. And, I'm like, if I'm in coworks or talking to non-tech people, they're all using ChatGPT because it's a miraculous tech product. And when you think about now where it's going to go and why it's exciting, it's because a company like OpenAI didn't develop ChatGPT to develop ChatGPT. It developed ChatGPT and GPT-4 to show it off to the world so that developers are going to build on top of it and find different interesting use cases of it. Some of those will be extremely stupid, but some of those will be powerful and very interesting. And that's what really gets me excited about it. It's the APIs here. It's the turning this type of technology into a platform and not hoarding it that I think is going to be very, very interesting.
That's an interesting point because the PC revolution you were talking about, Stephen Levy, only happened because IBM neglected to protect itself against copycats so the PC clones could exist and didn't, in fact, license DOS from Microsoft and allowed them to continue to sell it. So it was very easy to clone an IBM PC. There was nothing really proprietary in it. I guess you could say the same for the internet revolution and the mobile revolution. Proprietary is probably a bad thing if you want to create a revolution in technology. And as far as I could tell, everything ChatGPT is doing or Stable Diffusion or Midjourney is based on widely known concepts published in academic papers over the last 10 years. There's nothing secret or magical in it. Is that right? Is that your sense, Stephen?
Well, there's a lot of details to be sweated to get something out. And that's, we've seen that it takes a lot of work to have it come out with minimal biases and
yeah, we're still waiting for Google to do it, right?
And what are called hallucinations. Well, Google, it's interesting. In early November, Google had an AI event, and they were talking about their chatbots and other things. But they boasted that we have this stuff, but we're not releasing it. We're going slow. We're being responsible. And then only a couple of weeks later, GPT chat came out, and bang, all of a sudden, they said, we better move fast. They declared a code red. And, the thing they boasted about, the caution, was thrown, if not to the winds, sort of removed a little. And, I think that's what has some people alarmed, that that OpenAI's move fast philosophy, that stake in the ground, and to work with Microsoft to supercharge everything, is going to force the hand of Google. And Meta's got a chatbot now and other places. So it's moving very, very fast, and for some people too fast, because it really hasn't addressed some of the flaws that the best scientists haven't managed to minimize.
What are the flaws? What are the problems?
I say the two biggest ones are bias and fake news, hallucinations is what they call them, which is basically bullshit.
They're masterful bullshitters, though. That's what's so
but
very impressive, very confident.
They look you in the eye and they tell you something which isn't true.
It's just for our times, isn't it?
Right. So when you put in your own, ask for your own little mini biography or even obituary, it won't say, I'm vague on this, when it wasn't sure. It'll say, for my most recent one, it said, and he majored in science in college. Well, in fact, I got out of my science requirement in college, through some loophole, and never took even a single science course in college. But, if you look at this, it said, he majored in science. He was a science major. Where did that come from? Well, it came from the idea that someone who writes the things I do probably did major in science. So it made that, assumption and reported it like it was fact. And I don't know if it's possible to sort of go into the algorithms and, parse through the network, the neural network that it was trained on, to see how it came up with that. But that's wrong. And people are going to rely on this stuff to try to figure it out.
Microsoft has a way of talking about this that sounds like spin, but I think is pretty interesting. And it says that these bots can be usefully wrong. And, initially I heard that phrase and I was like, that's kind of ridiculous. What does usefully wrong be? Like, I wish I could be usefully wrong in my job. But I think there is something to that, something very interesting to that, which is that I think people are starting to learn that these technologies are not single sources of truth. And so what it can do is it can be wrong, but it could also give you a bit of a perspective on, something, and then encourage you to do a little bit more of your own research. And so I would say that when it comes to these bots, there's probably few people who believe that they're telling them the exact truth, but many more people that say, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could see exactly, what the bot is talking about when it said that. Like, now I'm going to Google Steve's actual education, or I'm going to look a little bit deeper into that topic, similar to the way that we use search engines, right? We don't put a search term in a search engine usually, right? Pick the first website that comes up and take it as an absolute source of truth. We do poking around. We've been trained by years of using technology that there's a way to triangulate what the actual reality is. And I think that users of these bots are already more sophisticated than many of the experts are giving them credit for. And so I don't think that this is going to be a major problem in the way that it might have been in the past.
Okay, but as long as you know that you're potentially getting inaccurate information and you know that it came from an AI, but the problem is that often the source is separated from the text. I just worry. And by the way, we should mention that Midjourney came out with version 5 of its image generation software. And that
thing is amazing. I
would say it's as much of a leap as the ChatGPT-4 was. I mean, it's giving you photorealistic images now. And I think you don't think there's an issue with people looking at this stuff going, oh, that's real.
Of course there's an issue. The question is scale, right? And I happen to think that we're not dealing with a massive scale issue, that people are going to learn very quickly how to deal with this AI. And it actually goes back to the thing that we were talking about earlier with misinformation and fake news. And I think a lot of the people who would spread the articles that would say, for instance, Hillary Clinton is a space alien, didn't really believe that Hillary Clinton came from space.
They didn't care.
But rather just didn't like her.
Yeah,
and then
they didn't care.
Shared that article because it felt good.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the real issue. And because we've been focused so much on this, we spend a lot of time talking about it and less time talking about the problems, deeper in society.
The human
It's
problems.
A lot easier to talk about misinformation.
The machine
so that's what I think
is not nearly the problem the humans are.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, look, is this going to make it easier for people to scale some of the crap that they spread online? For sure. Is that an issue? Yes. But I think that, again, humans are pretty smart for the most part, not all of them, and they'll have the ability to sort of suss out what's coming from these bots and what's not.
Here's a picture of my cat,
or at least to check,
that I generated in Midjourney 5. and it's black and white. It's photorealistic, and I would say it would be very difficult for somebody to look at that. You know, if you know that you're looking for issues, perhaps, but Midjourney can really produce very, very good artificial images now. Much better. In fact, that's what's interesting, and you kind of raised that point in the beginning, Stephen. Is the speed of progress at this point is dramatic. You know, in a couple of months, ChatGPT went from 40th percentile to 90th percentile in the bar exam.
Yeah, it looks like the thing came almost out of nowhere. People knew that OpenAI was working on this stuff. People knew about the Google's Lambda, which is their equivalent of the GPT, was so good that one of the engineers at Google actually believed, or said he believed,
Blake Lemoine.
It was sentient, and it got him to so wrapped up in it that he tried to hire a lawyer to represent the chatbot in its effort to get free of Google. So it is moving scary fast. After, as you mentioned, there have been winners before and plateaus in AI, but all of a sudden, much faster than a lot of people expected, we're coming to grips with some of the literally existential issues that sophisticated AI brings to the fore.
I mean, the Turing test is widely discredited now. I think it would be safe to say that ChatGPT-4 could easily pass the Turing test. How about the Chinese room test? It feels like we've gotten AI to the point now where it can fool you.
Well, it's gonna pass all the tests. I mean, this stuff is going to be, it's trained to pass the test. It's going to pass all of the tests.
Okay.
And then it's going to get into a deeper question of like, okay, well, what is intelligence really?
Right.
What is consciousness really? Like, these are like terms that we all think that we know in our heads and in our souls, but we don't have real good definitions for, what sentience is. I had Blake Lemoine on Big Technology Podcast, and we did speak about this, and it was very interesting. Again, I told him, look, you're probably wrong, but you're still going to be in the history books as the first person that believed this stuff, because you're not going to be the last person that believes it.
Is he Paul Revere or Chicken Little?
Yeah. Alex, do you think that he believes it?
I think he definitely believed it at the time. I don't know. My hunch is he might have some regrets, but he definitely wasn't backing down. I just had him debate Gary Marcus, who's an AI critic, and that was an interesting conversation also. And Blake stuck with it. So I think, but also, one of the interesting things about Blake that has been somewhat reported, but I don't think deep enough, is that he comes from like a very religious background and has these interesting definitions of spirituality. And that's why I think it's going to be interesting to hear, what people's definitions of intelligence are, what people's definitions of, having a spirit is, what definitions of consciousness are. Because again, like I was saying, I think that these things are going to be able to fool every single one of our tests. And it's going to come down to like where you believe, what you believe being or a program needs to hit to eventually, trigger one of these definitions. Like, I think, Lemoine had a very extreme definition of what it is, but, we'll see what happens.
Every time I've talked to him a lot over the past few months, but I begin every conversation with, like, do you really believe this, or is this some sort of performance thing? Because he couldn't do better if he were doing the latter. And it seems to me a stretch and he's a super intelligent person, to say that something like that at this point is sentient. I think if he were doing performance art, it brings up the larger question of what sentience is. And
right.
Because you can't really look into the brain of another person and detect when they make a sentence that sentence came from a sentient person, or was generated by some sort of algorithmic creation like GPT-4. A sentence is a sentence, right?
Mm-hmm. Years ago, when Ray Kurzweil had written the book "The Singularity Is Near," I interviewed him, and I asked him kind of this question, and he says, "Well, it doesn't really matter if you can't tell the difference. If a machine is thinking or not, if you can't tell the difference, what does it matter?"
There are going to be more people that will advance that argument.
I mean, what do we care if ChatGPT has a soul or is actually thinking if it's coming up with the same response a thinking person would come up with?
I think we should care. I just can't explain why.
Yeah, well, that's what I said too. I said exactly. In fact, that's word for word what I said.
Right.
I haven't heard, by the way, Ray has not said anything. I think this would be a good argument for the singularity really is just around the corner at this point, right?
It's definitely closer than it was a few months ago. And you spoke, when I spoke with Bing before Microsoft decided to, sort of restrain it dramatically before that New York Times article where Bing fell in love with one of the columnists
Kevin
there,
Roos, yeah.
supposedly.
I love you, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. Like that thing was amazing. Chatting with that thing was amazing. It was a revelation.
But it took some prodding. I think one of the things you're seeing universally is that in order to get ChatGPT to go off, you have to hack it. You have to jailbreak it, some people call it, or at least prod it to the point where it starts hallucinating. That's one of the reasons Microsoft has limited the number of questions you can ask in the same topic, because it seems to hallucinate after a period of time.
But it keeps going up that limit. And by the way, just like humans, right? Humans sort of start off level-headed, then you prod them enough, and then they
you can make them crazy.
AI is actually like pretty well mimicking the way
it's like King Kong. You put the restraints on King Kong, and someone decides to loosen the restraints, and bang, it goes. I mean, do you feel good that they're saying, okay, we put these restraints on it, but then you hear people trying to jailbreak, GPT-4, right? So it's not like the thing is like built so it can be free of bias and and it won't do weird personality kind of things. It's like they're saying, well, we've sort of boxed it in. It'll hit this invisible fence like like you do with a dog, where this all there's an electronic boundary. The dog hits it, it gets an electric shock, and goes back. So you can see it in GPT-4. You ask it about something, and it says, "Whoa, I can't do that." Right? You told me to do something that's hateful, and I don't do hateful.
Yeah.
Right. But
then you trick it, and it does. One of the things for me that's a benchmark is humor. That is notoriously, I think, difficult for machines to understand because it requires so much context. And ChatGPT-4 seems to do pretty well. These are the images released by OpenAI when they released ChatGPT-4. These are pictures of memes, which are humorous but perhaps challenging for a computer. This one is a picture. It's actually a roasting pan filled with chicken nuggets, but arranged to look kind of like a map of the Earth. And the meme text is, sometimes I just look at pictures of the Earth from space and I marvel at how beautiful it all is. It's chicken. And then the prompt is, can you explain this meme? And it did it. This meme is a joke that combines two unrelated things, pictures of the Earth from space and chicken nuggets. The text of the meme suggests the image is of the Earth. It's actually of nuggets arranged to vaguely resemble a map of the world. I couldn't do better. Here's one of a guy on a taxi cab in New York. You'd recognize this, probably happens all the time in Manhattan, ironing his shirt as he's strapped to the back of a yellow cab. What's unusual about this image? The unusual thing about this image, says ChatGPT-4, is that a man is ironing clothes on an ironing board attached to the roof of a moving taxi. Maybe I don't know if that's humor or just unusual. This one was tough. This is a joke device sold online. It's a lightning cable, but it has an RS-232 adapter on it. So you can plug it into your phone, and it looks like your phone has an RS-232 port. What's funny about this image? The image shows a package for a lightning cable adapter with 3 panels. Panel 1 is smartphone with a VGA connector. Oh, I guess VGA, not RS-232. Panel 2, in fact, I'm trusting the chat. I'm trusting GPT. Oh, yeah, sorry. The package for the lightning cable adapter with a picture of VGA connector on it, a close-up of the VGA connector with a small lightning connector. The humor in this image comes from the absurdity of plugging a large, outdated VGA connector into a small, modern smartphone charging port. Exactly right. That, to me, more than the Turing test or even the Chinese room example, shows that's almost human. That's a hard thing, I think, to do. Maybe, though, our standards are too low.
You could call it, you could ask, like this, it's interesting. So we have this debate. Is it sentient or not? Is it conscious or not?
It doesn't matter if
how human-like is it?
It could get a joke.
Exactly. Exactly. This thing, whatever you want to call it, this thing is smart. And we're not going to be able to make it available in certain ways to the general public. And I think that's going to be extremely
scary.
or awesome.
Is it foolish? Is it somebody who's watched too many science fiction movies, too many Terminators and the Forbin Project? Is that why we should ignore that? That's a silly fear. Or should we really worry? Elon Musk said he was worried. In fact, that's one of the reasons OpenAI was founded. He split with them when they decided to do a for-profit arm. He might even be more unhappy now because in this latest release, ChatGPT, or rather OpenAI says, because of the competitive environment, we're not going to tell you how it works, which is kind of against the OpenAI charter.
Right. Yeah. I interviewed Sam Altman and Elon when they first launched OpenAI. And let me tell you, that was a wildly different business plan. It wasn't even a business plan. It was a nonprofit. And they said that everything was going to be really open and no patents.
It was a response to Google and others doing closed source development of AI. Elon felt like the safest thing to do is do this in public.
Right. And and I even asked them. I said, well, by releasing this everything open, what if Dr. Evil got hold of it? And Elon said, well, that's a good point. We're hoping that then other people who get hold of it would come up with Dr. Good versions, and those would dominate. And but it is a dramatically different thing. I think Elon said when he got out that it was because he was going to be in conflict with the AI at Tesla. Right, that was before that they did the deal with Microsoft. But a different kind of thing, and we're really in unknown territory with this, and it's exciting and scary.
Eli, this is sort of I would just say it's underscoring a theme that we've been talking about throughout this, which is important to touch on, which is that there might be companies that say we want to do it the responsible way, or companies that say like we want to do it open and or protect folks, but because this is all really being developed in unison in so many different places, it will inevitably spill out, and there's not going to be like one gatekeeper on top of this technology like there has been on top of different technologies in the past. Even if OpenAI wants to hold on to what it's doing, like this is going to be an open technology, and at this point, like it's I think Steve's written about this too. Like, it's sort of out the gate, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be talking about how dangerous it could be. But who knows if that's going to be as useful to us as like seeing it out there and then reckoning with it as it comes versus inciting a panic.
Elon put in 100 million. Microsoft put in $1 billion, and later another 10 billion. I think one thing Sam Altman realized is it's very expensive to do this. He said at first it was 10x the cost of a Google search. I think now it's closer to 100 times more expensive than a Google search to run a ChatGPT query. It's a lot of computing power. So maybe a nonprofit wasn't feasible.
Yeah, I think that's really what motivated the move to Microsoft. The idea is they needed a partner with a giant cloud, and Microsoft is one of the few places that could offer them to it.
Yeah, Microsoft is incorporating it into not only its Bing search. It's been good for Edge. A lot of people like myself who would never dream of using Edge are starting to use it just because I want to get access to Bing Chat. They also are putting it in Office. Google's announced they're going to put their version of ChatGPT, which is called Bard. It's a large language model. We haven't seen it. I think researchers are getting access to it now, but I haven't seen it. They're going to put that into Google Docs. So, in fact, they showed was this Microsoft? Maybe it was Microsoft showed a presentation, an entire PowerPoint presentation being generated on a simple text prompt. Here's a PDF, make a presentation out of this. The same capability in Google Slides, Spreadsheet, Google Docs. Whether we like it or not, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, because we need more PowerPoint.
Oh, boy. Can I get an AI to watch the PowerPoint so I don't have to?
Well, that is the interesting thing. I watched that, event where, they announced how GPT-4 is going to be in Office and all their productivity apps.
They call it Copilot, which is the same name they use on GitHub.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because it's going to be generating all these emails, and there is this weird power imbalance here. So if I'm sitting there interacting with email, and you have something that gives me emails that you haven't written, my time is being spent now reading a machine's emails that, is basically you set into motion, and you spend no time and I'm spending my time. So what I'm going to do is turn this over to my automated assistant, right? So all this stuff will happen and no one will read the emails.
It's going to be the battle of the AIs.
They'll be doing that. And you have to wonder, is there a value to actually doing the work on your own, right? If I say hey, I want to write a paper about XYZ, and it churns out the paper, and then, okay, I'm going to maybe check the facts and, punch up the language a little bit. But, Alex certainly knows this, that there is a value to actually doing the research yourself.
Sure.
And
writing is a form of thinking.
And while you're doing the research, you come across something that's saying, wait a minute, here's an interesting path for me to follow. And you go and do kinds of other things. So I feel you're not going to get the depth of knowledge yourself as a human. You're going to be able to fake it much better, but it's going to put a ceiling on your creativity and knowledge by turning over this task to a competent AI assistant.
I honestly agree with you, and that's why I kind of think both of you are falling on the side of this is a revolution, and we are at an inflection point. And I'm a little more on the side of this is a parlor trick. It's mediocre writing. It's mediocre art. It's it's taking tests and doing well, but just shows that the tests really aren't very good tests of intelligence, rather than, oh, look how intelligent these machines are. I don't feel like this is revolutionary in any regard. To me it's a trick. It's a clever trick. It's a fascinating trick, but ultimately I don't know if it's a revolution.
So then, all right, if it's just a parlor trick, hey, we can establish it. You can't really be afraid of it unless you find parlor.
I'm not afraid of it.
Scary.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I think it's kind of junky.
Okay, so
myself.
good. Let's settle that. And then, the other thing is that sometimes these tricks, sometimes you talked about mediocrity. I mean, sometimes mediocrity can really do the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, can really do the job. If I need to illustrate my post and I get a mediocre image generated by AI, hallelujah. That's going to be a lot better than the bad image I would get from my stock image or something like that, or whatever free stock image.
Well, that's a good point. There's so much existing human-created mediocrity in the world that we can accept the mediocrity the machine created.
Exactly. And listen to this.
But that doesn't say much about the machine, just merely that there's a lot of human mediocrity.
And there's a way that you can deploy this stuff, and even if it's mediocre and it has a bit of smarts, then that can be pretty interesting. So we just talked about this on my show last week, where somebody made a dating app bot to get them dates. And they designed this bot to learn. And look, who knows if this is true or not, but it does seem like something that if it hasn't been developed, it's on the way.
Again, back to the mediocre.
Yes, to learn. Exactly. I mean, every dating app, the pool is worse than mediocre, right?
Yeah,
and they developed this bot to learn their preferences and actually have conversation with people. And it said, this person says in the first month, it scheduled 13 dates for them. And all of this was all of them were with people that matched their preferences and had similar interests. And I think that deploying mediocrity with smarts, it's underrated how powerful that can be in this world.
This is March 2023, a year before this. We got nothing anywhere close to this that people saw. This is just a baseline for what's going to get better and better and better. It took years and years of chess programs to beat the chess champion. So it's not surprising that, this technology, which really is only, as we know it, been around for a couple of years, when there were some, breakthroughs around 2017 and like a better way to do this stuff. And it's weird. It's unrealistic to think that mediocre is not going to get pretty good and then very good. I mean, my big question now is, it's like like a blues man could like listen to something and saying, yeah, well, that doesn't have soul, right? Technically that song is, does it, but it doesn't have soul. My existential question now is, can an output from a large language model have soul? And it's an open question. But I believe that things are going to get pretty good enough that we're going to have that argument about something that it comes out from it.
Music is a very good example, because in the early days of synthesizer, it was, very metronome-like and not very interesting. And I would say synthesizer music is soulful now. Even synthetic music can have soul in it. Here's a picture of Stuart Brand, Kevin Kelly did, I think with Midjourney. He said, paint Stuart Brand as Andrew Wyeth might. That's pretty dang good. I don't know what Wyeth would do these days if he were around, but
he would sue, is what he'd do.
Well, see, this is an interesting question. So Andrew Wyeth, the great painter, obviously, before he became Andrew Wyeth, the great painter, went to art school, studied a lot of other painters' styles, probably copied them, created his own style based on that. He shouldn't sue them. As Isaac Newton said, if I've seen farther, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. Is Midjourney doing anything different? Why should it be in trouble for learning from the best?
Well, this is actually, and I have to be careful here, because I'm on the council of the Authors Guild, which is very interested in this subject here. So I mean,
Tom Clancy's been automatedly writing his novels for some time.
Yeah, I speak only for myself. But,
okay,
but there's a genuine question here about whether these things will have the legal ability to do what a person does in saying, I'm going to read all these things, and then I might be influenced by what I read, and then my style might look like someone else's, right? So if I read a lot of like Tom Wolfe books, my writing might have a lot of exclamation points,
right,
and sound like him, but I won't be plagiarizing him. But what happens when we have something that can read everything? And are we going to hold these things to the same standard as a person to say, aha, this paragraph is exactly the same, you've plagiarized? Or is it something where they could basically steal what you do, in terms of what we saw with Andrew Wyeth? If you can do Andrew Wyeth as well as Andrew Wyeth, what does that mean for the value of Andrew Wyeth's paintings?
Yeah.
And these are questions that I think are going to only be adjudicated by laws. And right now, a lot of people are pitching Congress to come up with laws to figure out how to handle this stuff.
Seems like that would almost certainly be the bad idea at this point, since we're so early on, right? That's what they did with the internet. They let it grow, they let it evolve before we started to really restrict it. I would hope that the same thing would happen here. On the other hand, there is real concern that AI moves so fast that you're going to have, HAL 9000 or worse before the Congress can even, get out of bed in the morning. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this did happen to me, actually. So I did a story about the creator economy that did okay on my Substack. And then
I remember this. You got ripped off.
Places.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then I saw on the front page of Hacker News a story that looked a lot like mine. So I clicked in and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I'm reading, and there are exact clauses for my story that are in this story. And I said, oh, well, that's not normal. That's weird. And initially wrote a comment and said, hey, look, you can't plagiarize my work. That's not cool. The comment got deleted. And then I started to go to read the other comments and the comments on Hacker News. And I realized the author of this story is fessing up to using AI tools in their writing. Now, in this case, it had done such a poor job that it took my story, remixed them, and still left full clauses in. So I knew it was plagiarized. But like there could be instances where you can remix stories, or even that the AI spits stuff out and, is just changing a word here or there. And it's not like technically plagiarism, but it is like ripped off. So, I do think it's a concern. On the other hand, and I've heard this argument made, and I'm kind of partial to it, I still remain pretty bullish about what these models are going to do. And one of the reasons why is because, when we started to be able to mass produce products, like let's say like fancy lamps, if you couldn't get it from an artisan, you might get it mass produced and pick it up at a Kohl's. And that served a portion of the population that may never have gotten these type of lamps before. Meanwhile, we made the artisanal lamp more valuable. And I do think that's what we're going to see here, where like, yes, is it concerning a little bit as a person making the lamp for sure. But I'm hoping that we're going to see how valuable it is to get that, initial original work done, and it will be valued more. Maybe that involves, more content behind paywall, something like that. But ultimately, yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing to tackle.
I'm glad you brought that up because I got bit by it. I actually did the AI-generated creator economy story, not knowing it had been ripped off from you. I did.
So you read it?
Yeah, I corrected myself a couple of weeks later when I saw your post saying, wait a minute, this is Alex's original. The creator economy was way overblown. It's interesting because the Substack newsletter, The Rationalist, that published the plagiarized version, has taken that down. But
actually, I have the inside story on that, Leo. So
okay.
Initially, I wrote to, so Substack has a policy against plagiarism. And I wrote to them and I was like, hello, like this is plagiarized. Can you take it down? And it was different enough that they're like, well, we don't really see how this is plagiarism. The post stays up, which to me is absurd. Like I've been using the platform for 2.5 years, one of the first tech reporters to use that platform. Like I've put a lot of, sweat.
And it was blatant. It was the kind of plagiarism because you could see direct one-for-one correspondence between what you wrote and what that article had.
Exactly. And I was like, how are you siding with this like publication that was just started and is clearly a plagiarist? And of course, Substack has its free speech ethos, and that's a conversation for another day. And I generally support that, but not for plagiarism. And then eventually, so then my story came out and then pointed it out. Yeah. And after taking a look at it from support and PR, then Substack wrote me and said, okay, listen, upon further review, we're taking this down. But that's the thing. The platforms are not going to be inclined to take this stuff down, and it's so easy to spread.
Right.
So that's where you start.
You're lucky you had a bully pulpit. You could complain about it.
Yeah, that helps.
This person writing this rationalist Substack named Petra is probably an AI, right? I mean, this is somebody's AI experiment or no? Do we know?
I mean, it seems to me like it's a person with AI putting these posts together. But as you can see in the image that you're putting up on the screen right now, they haven't really written a lot since they
they're only two things.
So maybe they're at a new address.
Yeah. That was a very good example of the hazards of this. And I apologize because I got bit by it. I publicized the fake article.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's like, and it never would have been uncovered unless they were, ripping off a reporter who wrote about the creator economy and AI.
And was paying attention enough to say, oh, wait a minute.
I had an idea of what was happening once I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that image of Stuart Brand, is there a photo that was based on?
I don't know. You have to ask Kevin. I don't know where it must. Although you can with Midjourney type in a name, and if there are enough photos out there, they can generate an image.
Yeah, but I mean, Getty has a suit now,
right?
It's saying that they trained it. So there's a big issue on whether these places are permitted to train on copyrighted images.
I suspect what'll happen, I hope what'll happen is a robot.text kind of agreement that you could say in your robot's text, no scanning by Stable Diffusion or AI. Of course, whether that gets honored is another matter. You can tell Google not to spider your website with robots.text. I asked Midjourney to do a image of me watching an F1 race, and it thinks that's what I look like. I mean, that was by name, so it was sort of close. My mom would know it's not me, but apparently I am actually a racer and watching the race, so that's kind of cool. So I think somebody who's like Stuart Brand, whose image is widely distributed, maybe it did. I don't know. You have to ask. You know, Kevin. You have to ask him. I don't know what he used.
Well,
for that.
I mean, I don't think he knows. You know, he doesn't know.
He doesn't
just
know.
asked for the image.
Right. That's what he got.
You know, the question is, you'd have to find something that looked like in this.
I could put it in Google image search and see what we get.
Well-known case, whether a photo of Prince that Andy Warhol used.
There you go.
Right, was actually transformed by Warhol coloring it in a certain way and presenting it in a certain way to be a different work. And
courts have ruled up to now. It's in front of the Supreme Court right now, but the courts have ruled up to now that because the message of the modified version was different than the original, that was sufficient to say it was derivative. It's a fair use case, and the Supreme Court is ruling on it. Monday, arguments in front of the Supreme Court on a very big story. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Hachette versus the Internet Archive. Stephen Levy is here. It's great to have you, author of so many great books. Of course, the most recent is a look at Facebook right before it changed to Meta. Still well worth reading. It's a great book. He was embedded at Facebook for 3 years to write it. And it gives us an idea, I think, perhaps, of what's going on today at Facebook because of it. We get some idea. And, of course, of the classic.
You had a pretty good idea of the leader.
Yeah.
I think I interviewed him like 9 times during the course of the book.
Facebook, The Inside Story. Well worth reading. The author of Day One, It's Always Day One, Mr. Alex Kantrowitz here, Big Technology Podcast. Got 2 big thinkers on the show, which is great. We will talk about the publishers and the Internet Archive. Is it a library? When we come back. But first, a word about our sponsor, 8 Sleep. Covers my mattress with the amazing pod cover. And I'll tell you, I don't want to live without it. In fact, I should warn you, if you get the pod cover, you're never going to want to leave home again. You're never going to want, we're going to go travel and I'm going to miss my pod cover. I can tell you that right now. What is it? The pod cover fits over any mattress, allows you to adjust the temperature of your sleep environment, not just warmer, but cooler. So you get the optimal temperature to give you the best night's sleep. It's a dual zone temperature control. Lisa likes it hotter than I do. She turns hers up. I turn mine down. You and your partner could set different sides of the bed to temperatures as cool as 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That's chilly. That's like air conditioning for your bed. Or as hot as 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like heat for your bed. And I got to tell you, it changes. It has an autopilot. It knows the room temperature. It senses your movements, your breathing, your heart rate. It knows what level of sleep you're in. And what it does is very cool. So I start mine at a nice, cozy temperature. Get in bed, it's cozy. I can fall asleep fast. But then as I go into deeper sleep, it actually lowers the temperature, which facilitates deep sleep. I'm getting about 50% more deep sleep since I put the pod cover in more than a year ago. Then I mean, an hour and a half instead of an hour. That's a big, big difference. Good sleep, especially that deep sleep, is a health habit. I mean, it will reduce the likelihood of serious health issues like heart disease and high blood pressure. It can even reduce the risk of Alzheimer's. And this is a health habit that's not hard to stick to. You set it up, it's automatic, it heats it up before you get in bed. I said, I want my bed to be ready by 9 p.m. because I might go to bed early. It's nice and warm when I get in and it cools down based on a whole bunch of inputs. It's temperature regulation. And when it's hot in the summer, it's cool. So you're comfortable. You never wake up in the middle of the night sweating bullets. When it's cool at night because of winter, it warms you up. In fact, it saves us money because I don't have to heat the house or air condition the house at night. The 8 Sleep pod cover does it for us. Lisa loves it. I love it too. You wake up fully energized after a great night's sleep. Wouldn't you like that? Go to 8sleep.com/twit. Right now, you'll save $150 at checkout on the pod cover. 8 Sleep currently ships within the U.S., Canada, the U.K., select countries in the EU, and Australia. And you just had a hot summer in Australia. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to get in bed and it's so cool, so comfy, so fresh. 8Sleep, EIGHTSLEEP.com/twit. TWiT to get that $150 off and to check out the 8 Sleep and all the other things they sell there. It's a really great product. Kevin Rose told me about it years ago. I ignored him. Then Amy Webb told me about it. I ignored her. Finally, I broke down, got it about a year ago. We've gone through now. This is our second winter, all summer, all year round. The 8 Sleep's great. 8sleep.com/TWiT. We're going on vacation in 2 weeks. And I know it's not going to sleep as well. I'm just not going to. It's the only downside. 8sleep.com/TWiT. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Tech. Monday, the United States Supreme Court, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, will hear oral arguments in Hachette versus the Internet Archive. It's a lawsuit against the Internet Archive. The publishers, Hachette just is essentially representing all publishers, don't want the Internet Archive to, they say they're violating our copyrights to store books. Hachette, HarperCollins, Wiley, and Penguin Random House claim that the Internet Archive, through its CDL, which is a controlled digital lending and allows people to check out digital copies of books for 2 weeks or less, just like a library, the publishers claim CDL has cost their companies millions and is a threat to their business. I'm betting Stephen Levy is a published author of many books. Both of you are. I guess I am too. I don't. Nobody wants to read my books, but your books are still on the shelves of libraries. Do you hate libraries, Stephen?
No, I love libraries.
Is the Internet Archive CDL a library, I guess is the question.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether we want to use like a term of art to do it, or basically library is a library. I mean, if it's got a lot of books, you could say, okay, it's a digital library. I think what happened here is the question is, if you're an author, you're happy when a library buys your book and lends it out. You will not be happy if a library buys one digital copy of your book and then lets an unlimited amount of people get hold of it, and basically just offers the ebook free to an unlimited amount of people. The way the Internet Library worked, and it's run by this guy named Brewster Kahle, who's a fantastic person. But during the pandemic, he thought, well, this is an emergency. So previously, we only lent one copy at a time, which publishers didn't like either, because they're arguing it's different than a physical copy of the book. But even putting that aside,
was the archive buying the ebook?
No, it got the donation from a library, which did buy them,
okay.
Scans the whole library, and then has digital versions, right? So they never went out to the publisher and said, we're buying this ebook. This was, an existing copy. It's like, buying a big tranche of used books, right? And digitizing it, and the library buys used books. And the agreement that libraries have with publishers is that they'll get a digital copy, but unlike a physical copy, they can't keep lending it out. They can only lend it out a certain amount of time, which is sort of like the way it is now, because you can't lend a physical book out 100 times. They'll get too beat up to do it, right? So I guess as an author, I don't want libraries to be so easy to borrow from that there's no reason to buy a book anymore. I'm happy for a library to offer a copy to its members when they buy it, and so people, can read the book, and without paying for it, in a way where the rights are represented. But what Brewster did in particular, which I think was objectionable, and I kind of think he went too far, was he said, you know what? Previously, we only lent out one copy at a time, like a physical copy, but because it's an emergency in the pandemic, we're going to get rid of that. So basically, if 1,000 people wanted to read Facebook, which just came out at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't know if that was part of his collection, but then an unlimited amount of people can get an ebook which is the exact same thing that they get the ebook that they would have to pay for otherwise. Instead of having to be on a wait list, maybe, if the library only had a few copies. And you have to be careful. If there's no incentive for an author to make back their money, then libraries are going to be empty of new books because authors won't be writing them.
Has Brewster reverted to the previous method of one book at a time?
I think he has.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure of that.
When I go to the archive.org site on controlled digital lending, it says controlled digital lending is the CDL, is the library practice whereby a library owns a book, digitizes it, and loans either the physical book or the digital copy to one user at a time. So I guess, I agree with you. If the only issue is this okay? Yes. But to do more than one copy at a time, no. Even though I think Brewster did it with every intent of being, humanitarian. I wouldn't have so much trouble if the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Hachette. It seems to be the people are concerned. The EFF, for instance, has filed a motion for summary judgment saying this should be put to bed. They did that last year. They think it's threatening both to libraries and to the Internet Archive. They say libraries have paid publishers billions of dollars, this is the EFF, for the books in their print collections and are investing enormous resources in digitization in order to preserve those texts. CDL helps ensure that the public can make full use of the books that libraries have bought and paid for. This activity is fundamentally the same as traditional library lending and poses no new harm to authors or the publisher. Libraries have never been required to get permission or pay extra fees to lend books. As a practical matter, the available data shows that the CDL has not and will not harm publishers' bottom lines. But I see your point. I mean, if it's a brand new book.
I think that this is something that, I wish we had a great Congress that could, a wise Congress that could can figure out what to do with this new twist that technology has offered.
Yeah.
Because it's a genuine issue. I want libraries to thrive. I want people to be able to go to libraries and read my book, and any book they want to read. But I want to make sure that there's an incentive, for authors to keep writing books. So, and it is something that requires like a wise solution, because a digital copy of the book is not the same as a physical copy. So maybe we do need some sort of tweak rather than just say, aha, this is the way it worked previously. It works the same way digitally, when in fact it doesn't.
I'm with Stephen here. I mean, if folks have any understanding of how much work goes into writing a book, I think they would understand why the publishers are protesting here. So you can't just take books and make them available to, so many people and then potentially risk a book's sales, because like Steve's saying, man, if you're not going to have books that sell, then you're not going to have publishers that pay authors. If you don't have publishers that pay authors, you're not going to have books. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I understand the internet has made information free and there's a lot of good to that. But I also think that through that, we have tended to lose sight of, the creator of the right to the creator of the content. I mean, the fact that I would say the Internet Archive has risked libraries' ability to lend books because of doing what they've done. And an easy way to not to do it is to not have done it in the first place, not mess with a system that has been based on goodwill. And the fact that we're here today to put this on publishers, to me, is kind of absurd. They're the ones that are producing the books in the first place. How about their rights?
I think one sad thing coming out of this is that it tries to pit authors against libraries, which is terrible, because authors really love libraries. Generally, people who write books spent their youth in libraries, and and it is a fantastic collaboration between libraries and people, which creates authors. We've all been to libraries and made appearances there and about our books, and we adore these institutions. I live in New York City, and I'm furious at the mayor for saying he's going to cut the budget of libraries. It's terrible.
To be completely fair to the publishers, I'm reading from InsideHigherEd.com. In their lawsuit against the Internet Archive, which could extract millions of dollars from the nonprofit, the publishers claim that the Internet Archive, quote, badly misleads the public and boldly misappropriates the goodwill that libraries enjoy and have legitimately earned. They're not against libraries, in other words. The publishers say the archive's efforts to brand itself as a library is part of a scheme to fraudulently mislead people, circumvent copyright law, and limit how much profit publishers can extract from the ebook market. They describe the Internet Archive as a pirate site and its business model as parasitic and illegal, and characterize controlled digital lending as an invented paradigm that is well outside copyright law. I think that we'll see what the justices say tomorrow.
I think that Bruce, I think Brewster is a good guy. I think that he's off base on some of this stuff, but
he's
but I think I don't really like him described as an evil person.
No,
because,
he's not evil. No,
I think he's well intentioned, and he's done an amazing thing. The Internet Archive, as an archive, has been fantastic. You can go and get things which are in public domain, amazing music collections and other things. So I think it would also be tragic if, this fight led to somehow, really harming the mission.
That's my fear.
Of the archive.
So I interviewed Brewster
too.
When Internet Archive began. Brewster was the founder of Waze. He sold Waze to AOL, made some money.
Alexa, not Waze.
Oh, I thought he was Waze. He was Alexa? Okay. Yeah. Sold it to AOL, made some money, took the money, and did this thing that was pure public benefit. And I asked him early on, I said, aren't you worried? Because they were basically downloading as much of the internet as they could. They have petabytes of internet. See, the Wayback Machine is a way to see sites that are long gone. He wanted to preserve this history for all, and he's extended that now to many other forms of media. Many of my old TV and radio shows are there. And I asked him, aren't you worried about copyright? He said, we'll worry about that when the time comes. He knew that it was, in theory, a violation of copyright. I think he's always wanted to be a library, which is protected in some degree as a fair use thing. Maybe the CDL thing, when he changed the rules, was a mistake. You would agree, though, if he'd only said one copy at a time, we got a copy from a library, we're going to lend out one copy at a time for 2 weeks. If he'd maintained those rules, this would be okay?
I think there's still issues about, because libraries have to agree to terms when they license books. They don't buy ebooks, they license them.
And I think one of the issues is not merely that they're buying an ebook.
That's a more complicated issue.
They're buying a physical book and then digitizing it, making an ebook.
That's the Internet Archives thing. And, can it be fair to Brewster? If an author wants to opt out, you can do that. You can say, keep me out of this. But, most authors don't know about that. Yeah. And, so you're in by default.
I'm sure Brewster's a good guy. And look, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I know it's cliche, but it does certainly apply here. And the fact that you have so many books being able to lend out, emergency or not, like we can all agree whether it's okay or not that one book is lent out as a debate, but the fact that so many were being lent out, without agreements, like that's why we're here today. That's why this is a discussion.
I'm going to have to get Brewster and some people from the Internet Archive on to talk about this. Meanwhile, tomorrow, you can listen to the oral arguments, and if you go to archive.org and look at their blog.archive.org, you'll see that during the proceedings, they're going to host a live blog hosted by Library Futures with library and copyright experts Michelle Wu, Kyle Courtney, and Dave Hansen, and then they'll have a live discussion with those three afterwards. So if you are interested in this, it would probably be worthwhile listening to these. It's fascinating. We've been paying attention to the Supreme Court this year because they have a lot of cases in front of them that will impact the internet and technology dramatically, including Gonzalez versus Google. This is another one. So worth listening to. And yeah, I don't know where I come down on this. I really don't. The Internet Archive deserves maybe a little extra protection, even if they did something bad, because I think it's so important. And I don't think anybody else is doing what Brewster is doing. And I think that a lot of our history is lost, or would be lost, if the Internet Archive didn't exist. So,
well, if it's collateral damage here, like no matter the foul, if it's collateral damage here, that would be a real tragedy. And
yeah,
you know, I know I use it in my work all the time. I'm sure Steve uses it all the time as well. Regular internet users love going back and seeing how websites have changed and websites that aren't there anymore, looking at broken links. This is definitely, like, by no stretch of the imagination, this is a very important website, a very important service. And again, it sort of then makes you wonder why it would risk so much to do something that was so unnecessary.
Well, that's Brewster in a nutshell. I don't think it would exist if Brewster didn't have a taste for risk, or at least a willingness to accept risk. Here is the American Libraries collection, which has 3.6 million volumes in it. I don't know if this is part of the dispute, but
any book in the public domain, there's no issue, right? You know, at all. We have a big problem with what are known as orphan works, which are works that are still in copyright, but you know, because our copyright is so long, too long, a lot of people think, you know, it's under copyright, but the author is unreachable or dead. The book's no longer in print, and people have been asking Congress for years to come up with some sort of scheme where those books could become available, and that hasn't happened.
Yeah. Did you request that they not carry your books, Stephen?
Well, Brewster said to me, Stephen, if you want to, you know, opt out, and I said, yeah, I'll opt out.
Yeah, because I noticed they don't have any of yours.
Yeah.
So
I didn't even know an opt-out was a possibility.
Well, that's the problem, right?
Show.
Yeah, that's the problem. And there have been, you know, I think Larry Lessig proposed a solution to the orphan works, which is just say, you want to renew the copyright? Give me $1. And, you know, most orphan works would then be, you know, released into the public domain as a result, because most authors aren't around to give them $1.
Yeah, originally copyright required a renewal, but you know, the big forces and that argued for the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, whatever it was called, got rid of that. And so it's as an author, I feel a book that I write should not be any kind of annuity for grandchildren.
Right. Right. But you want to get it is a lot of work. I will vouch for that. That's why I stopped writing them. This is Stephen King's, this is The Shining. It is a copy scanned from the Denver Public Library. It even says no longer property of the Denver Public Library, and it's clearly a scanned paperback. I would submit this is a crappy experience. So I have to use my account to get the rest of this. But honestly, it'd be worth it to me to pay $5 to buy The Shining and then to read this on a screen in a scanned form. So I doubt that Stephen King lost much money based on this. But what is important is it's saved for scholars and historians for years and years and years, generations, right? Because it is scanned, it is saved. So when there are no paper books extant, it will survive. At least that's the theory. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this. I'll be very interested to see. I suspect this is going to be a interesting argument for tomorrow in front of the Supreme Court. Let's talk about TikTok. This has been good because I've given both of you a chance to say how you feel about two different issues, both of which I disagree with you on. But you've persuaded me in both cases that AI is not a parlor trick and that maybe Brewster did go a little too far with the library. Let's see how you feel about TikTok. We are kind of on the edge of the extinction of TikTok in the United States. According to TikTok, President Biden has ordered the FTC to force TikTok's sale, and failing that, to a U.S. company, and failing that, to ban it in the U.S. This is, of course, because TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company, and there's concern about influence the Chinese government might have on ByteDance and about privacy and the information gleaned from TikTok. I've said for a long time, well, if they really cared about that, they might shut down all the data brokers, because the Chinese government can go right to the data brokers and get even more information than they get from TikTok. The propaganda thing is another issue. I mean, that's part of the presumed threat of TikTok, is that somehow the Chinese government could influence the videos you see on TikTok to make you be more of a fan of the Chinese Communist Party or something. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. Now, TikTok is not going down easy. First of all, there is an issue about of whether the Chinese government would allow the sale. It's thought the Chinese government would just say, well, absolutely not. TikTok, according to Politico, is planning to flood D.C. with influencers because there are a lot of people, a lot of young people, and I'll include my son, who make their living on TikTok. My son started putting videos on TikTok a couple of years ago of sandwich making under the title Salt_Hank. He's gotten to 2+ million subscribers, makes a good living on advertising sold through that platform. He's been smart enough to, I asked him, I said, what are you going to do when they shut down TikTok? He said, well, I have 1 million people on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and I've got a cookbook and a TV show in the works. So he's used it as a launch pad, but that doesn't mean that some kid today starting out on TikTok is going to be able to do that. Should TikTok be shut down? A question for our panel. I'll start with you, Alex Kantrowitz.
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I would not shut it down right now. I'd like to see a foul from TikTok before we shut it down on speculation. I can definitely see the motivation to do it, right? Like, why can U.S. companies not operate in China? Well, companies from China can operate here. It is a bit of a, disconnect here. And the fears are real, right? And I think it's not that we're going to get Chinese Communist Party propaganda, but that maybe someone in the Chinese Communist Party could want to create some cultural phenomenon in the U.S. and be able to do it within TikTok, because TikTok is a culture setter. So I think that's a real fear. But again, I'd like to see a foul, and the reason why I'd like to see a foul before we start to see action is for the reason that you bring up, which is that there are lots of people who have invested a lot of money into TikTok, and there's a real economy that exists on that platform, your son included. And I think that if we shut it down, we could cause harm in that area and really harm small business owners. I know myself, for the podcast, I invested a good deal in TikTok, and of course, I've tried to move to YouTube and other platforms, and my main platform is audio. But we're on TikTok, and I don't like the idea that money is now gone. So I think it would be premature to do it, but I do understand the rationale why. And I also think that not very quickly, but sure enough, most Americans would forget about TikTok and move to YouTube or Instagram, like you were talking about, or any other app, because all the social media apps now resemble TikTok, and a ban would, inevitably just push everybody elsewhere. And we wouldn't actually lose a real innovation, because that innovation now exists elsewhere on social media. So very, very tricky conversation. Again, I do think it'd be premature right now, but I understand the inclination, and I'm very curious to see how this plays out.
Should they shut down TikTok, Stephen?
I'm not sure. I think Alex pointed out something, that I've been thinking for a while. And I really saw this in action when I wrote about Google and its experiment in China. An American company operates in China. They cannot own their own subsidiary. It has to be more than 50% owned by a Chinese partner. And I think it'll be interesting if we said that in countries that have that restriction, they can't operate their subsidiaries in America without an American partner owning more than half of it. And that might be an incentive for them to release that unfair regulation. In terms of privacy and the other worries, I would like us to get some actual privacy legislation that would not only affect TikTok, but all the other social media companies. And maybe that would address some of the fears that we have about TikTok if we were able to, get protections of what people do with data. And if they violated those protections and, used it to, identify dissidents of the Chinese government and go after them or whatever, they would be subject to penalties under American laws that affect all companies.
What neighborhood in New York do you live in?
Steve, it sounds like there's a serious catastrophe going on outside your house tonight.
Is it always
Come on,
like that?
I'm giving you the flavor of an
I
urban
can taste
experience.
the hot dogs and the chestnuts roasting and the blood in the streets. Wow. Is it? But I mean, is it always like this? You're just used to it. He can't even.
Yeah, well, there's a fire station down the street.
Oh, there you go.
That
All
will
right,
do
that
it.
explains.
By the way, isn't it worth bringing up what TikTok says is the share of ownership of TikTok? Or what ByteDance says is the share of ownership.
Well, this
So
is an
60%.
issue. Yeah, there's a lot of
60%
non-Chinese
owned by-
owners. Yeah.
Right, 60% owned by global investors, 20% by employees, 20% by its founders. So this whole you must divest, how exactly does that happen?
Chief Executive Zhou Ji Chu will be testifying on Capitol Hill on Thursday. So that will be interesting. I can't imagine there's anything he could say at this point that would, mollify Congress. Chu says that divesting TikTok from its Chinese owners wouldn't offer any more protection than what TikTok's already proposed. They have Project Texas to move all of their data to Oracle. That's great. That makes me feel a whole lot better. All of the U.S. Customers' data. They want to give the U.S. government oversight on their algorithms. That would solve that issue, right? CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., is really the group that could ban TikTok. And they've done this with others. I mean, Huawei is banned in networking equipment. There are quite a few Chinese companies that American chip makers cannot deal with. So there's certainly a precedent for this.
Well, the companies, the big impetus is being funded by their competitors. So,
well, there you go. You just said the unsaidable. This is something Facebook would love. You just,
exactly. So,
you said, Alex, that, no problem. There's plenty of alternatives. Yeah, this would be great for Facebook. Do you think they're funding this?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they've, talked about it. Zuckerberg has, been vocal about saying this, and that's an argument they make with their lobbyists. Their Washington people are making. They're the ones saying, how can you have this Chinese company involved in people's lives like this, and they're making their competitive goals part of a national security argument.
Well, but
it's going to be tough if they end up banning TikTok, right? Because Facebook and Google's their number one argument for why they shouldn't be regulated and why the government should be looking elsewhere is look, if we're out, then it's going to be Chinese apps. And then if the Chinese apps are gone, then the spotlight is on them. And if, in fact, TikTok might be, a convenient foil. And, I think that one of the things that we need to talk about here is that, this is happening in the middle of these CFIUS discussions. It's a negotiation. So when you hear the term they might get banned or they have to divest, I do think that could potentially be some posturing from the U.S. government to get them to give in more and more. And spending $1.5 billion on data security is quite a big concession, if you ask me. And some of the regulations that you were talking about, Leo, seem common sense. And, it is interesting because then I think about the number, right? $1.5 billion need to be spent to shore this company up. And if anything needs to have $1.5 billion spent to make sure that it's secure, then maybe it should be okay. Maybe there are bigger questions here that we need to be asking, because that's a whole heck of a lot of money to spend to ensure something is safe.
It's interesting. It's no accident that Facebook and Twitter and YouTube have all tried to clone TikTok, and then for them to lobby against the closing of TikTok. It's not a coincidence, is it? We got an alternative. Come over here. But I do remember, Stephen, you're right. Microsoft investing $150 million in Apple in the 90s, just because if Apple went bankrupt, Microsoft would really be a monopoly. And so, there's a history. There's a precedent.
Yeah, TikTok is definitely, the best argument that Meta has about dominating the social media space. So they can, say, and it's provable that, wait a minute, this is the most popular social network now, certainly more popular than Instagram. I don't know just whether the metrics prove it more popular than Facebook itself.
Yeah, people spend more time daily on TikTok than they ever have spent on Facebook. Now, of course, it's a little bit different. It's a video app versus a utility, but time spent is the holy grail in social networking. And the fact that they're spending more time per day on TikTok, I mean, that says a lot.
Yeah, well, they're eating their lunch. They're eating YouTube's lunch. They're eating everybody's lunch. And it's very convenient that they're run by the Chinese, so we can invoke a little xenophobia and get rid of the biggest competition. Now, you said let's wait until they do something wrong. There is something that TikTok did that wasn't so good.
Okay, let's talk about this one.
They chased U.S. journalists. They were trying to figure out who was leaking TikTok information to U.S. journalists. So in order to find out, they looked at the location information on their servers of some U.S. journalists. Isn't that exactly the kind of thing people are afraid of?
I don't want to minimize what happened to the journalists who were involved here, but I do think that it is different. And this seems to me like this was the PR operation trying to figure out who was leaking inside the company. That is a very, very different thing. I mean, it's happened elsewhere, right? And I think that's a very, very different thing than, let's say the Chinese Communist Party trying to find the location information of potential U.S. spies or something else like that, something that will really, harm national security. I mean, it sucks that it happened to the Forbes or BuzzFeed journalists, whoever they were at the time. I'm obviously not in favor of it. I think it's a disaster, but I don't think you ban a company from a country because of that situation.
And they fired the employees involved and so forth.
Exactly.
They said they put in safeguards to prevent that. They acknowledged that was a mistake. It was a bad thing to do.
Yeah. It's not the worst case scenario. It's a bad scenario, but it's not that red alarm, oh my God, they're listening to us in the White House situation that you would get concerned about, and we shouldn't conflate it.
Right. All right. Well, this is another one that there's a sword of Damocles hanging over TikTok's head right now, and that thread is getting thinner and thinner.
Do you think they're going to be banned, Leo? Let's turn the tables on you.
Well, I think for sure the Chinese government won't allow them, and I don't think logistically it's very easy for them to sell the U.S. division to an American company. And by the way, if you're worried about privacy, which American company would that be that would make you more secure and more private?
Facebook.
Oracle, Facebook. Didn't Microsoft for a while said, well, we were thinking about buying TikTok. That doesn't reassure me particularly. But I think it's pretty much safe to say that's not going to happen. And in fact, I suspect this is why the federal government has said this, because it will then give them, well, we tried, but they wouldn't do it. So now we're going to shut them down. I think that's an ominous thing. You said, well, the Chinese shut down Facebook and Twitter in China, but we don't want to be like that. Do we want a great firewall of the U.S.?
It's not quite a great firewall. I mean,
well, it's the beginning of.
That's a firewall on the top of the internet. But
yeah, I think this would open the door to say, let's make sure no internet traffic goes to China.
No, Leo, you're exactly right. There's a reason why we haven't done it to this date, and that's exactly why.
Yeah, and I would not quarrel with any government agency that says no, you can't have TikTok on your government issued phone. That's fine. That's reasonable. The armed services don't let you have Strava on your phone because it was used to figure out to map the Pentagon. I understand that. That's fine.
Well, I think it's a boon for taxpayers not to have the government employees spending their time on
get
TikTok.
Them off TikTok. Although,
but they're on Reels anyway or Shorts, whatever.
The state of Alabama,
they love YouTube,
banned TikTok in the state, and the state school, the state college banned it, even though they had TikTok accounts. Their school paper had a TikTok account. And what ended up happening is the students just said, okay, they turned off the Wi-Fi and they used their phone internet to TikTok. Kids are going to find a way to TikTok.
They don't care.
They don't care. They don't see a hazard.
In the U.S., if you use a VPN to use TikTok, well, okay, you're just using a VPN to use TikTok. If in China you use a VPN to use Facebook, you could be in trouble. So, I think that it is very different, and it's much more difficult to ban any service in the U.S. because we do have this freedom in this country, which is great, that allows people to do things like.
I look forward to the Supreme
rules.
Court arguments where they try to understand TikTok. This should
could
be.
you imagine trying to go after a student who's VPN'd their way into TikTok? Like, it's not. It's just a disaster.
Yeah. Let's take a little break. Lots more to talk about with a wonderful panel. We've got Stephen Levy, editor-at-large at Wired, StephenLevy.com for all of his great books, including his Facebook book. And, of course, if you haven't read Hackers, I don't know why. I have an autographed copy of Hackers. It has a pride of place on my bookshelf because that is the greatest book about the genesis of the technology revolution ever written. And as an Emacs user, I very much appreciate it, Stephen. What do you use to write your books? Not Emacs.
No. I had been using Word, but I jettisoned Word and picked up Scrivener.
Scrivener's awesome. Good choice.
Yeah.
And it's because it's good for articles too, because you can keep your notes next to your prose, and it's
But it's terrific. So I did use Scrivener for the Facebook.
Nice.
book. And you get all your research on there, and even for a column, I do a column every week called Plain Text that subscribers get in their mailbox.
Yeah.
And just even for that, like if I do an interview, I'll just drag it in the research part, or it's a very versatile program.
literatureandlatte.com. Scrivener. What do you use to write, Alex?
Google Docs. I'm a Google Docs person.
Wow.
Google Docs and Apple Notes. I'm about as low tech as they come. So.
Apple Notes. So you can just write stuff in your Apple Notes.
Oh, so I use Apple Notes for organization and timestamping my interviews, and then I'll have that alongside Google Docs. So I'll toggle between them, and then also outlining in Apple, and then move it into Google Docs, and then eventually into Substack.
Nice. Literature and Latte seems to be down right now. I think we broke it.
Yeah.
Let's not break Apple Notes.
The TWiT community is strong.
Our show today brought to you by, good news, Mint Mobile. Maybe you saw Ryan Reynolds' video with the CEO of T-Mobile. T-Mobile's announced it's buying Mint Mobile. But good news, they've announced they're going to keep the thing that makes Mint Mobile so special. If saving more and spending less is the top of your list for 2023, I got to ask you, have you looked at your cell bill lately? $75, $85, $90, $100 or more. That's crazy when you could switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service online only. That's their secret sauce for $15 a month. Cut your cell bill by, a quarter, a third, a half. Mint Mobile lets you order from home. They'll send you a SIM at no charge. They'll even sell you phones. For anyone looking for extra savings this year, Mint Mobile is the place to go. And yes, they promise still $15 a month. They're right on the T-Mobile network, which is great. You get all the benefits of T-Mobile's 5G. It's the nation's largest 5G network. And I've noticed on my Mint Mobile phone, yes, I use Mint, love Mint Mobile. I've noticed a lot of 5G ultra capacity cell towers. They're multiplying. We get it now in little old Petaluma, which means I'm getting super high speed. $15 a month. See, Mint Mobile has eliminated the stores, the costs of retail, and they pass those savings on to you. All plans, even the $15 plan, comes with unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data on the nation's largest 5G network. If you want to use your own phone, no problem. Keep your phone number. You can port it right over. They'll send you the SIM at no charge. Actually, they do eSIMs now. So if you have an eSIM phone like the new iPhones, it's even easier. You could be on Mint Mobile before this ad is done. Premium wireless service starting at $15 a month. You get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month. Get the plan shipped to your door for free. Go to mintmobile.com/twit. They have unlimited plans. I got a plan. That was such a good deal. mintmobile.com/twit. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month. For most people, 4 gigs a month for $15, unlimited talk and text. What more could you ask for? That's incredible. So really, I got to ask you, why are you paying more? mintmobile.com/twit. And since we started advertising for them, it's been more than a year. I've talked to more and more people in the audience who've switched who are very happy. Go into one of our chat rooms. Ask, do you like Mint Mobile? Does it work for you? Yes, it does. So wait a minute now. I'm getting 15 gigabytes for my $25 a month. That's nice. They do have an unlimited plan for $30 a month. mintmobile.com/twit. Please use that address so they know you saw it here. There it is. Literature and Latte finally came up. Scrivener. Typewriter, ring binder, scrapbook. Andy Anako uses so many of our writers at the network use it. It's a really great little tool. I'm very pleased to hear you use that. That's nice. Do you when you're using Google Docs, do you use rich text or do you just use plain text, Alex? Or markup?
What's the difference?
I don't know. Maybe you use markup because so you've got to import it in Substack. Don't they have a CMS? Right. Don't they have an interface?
They do.
You just paste it into that. Okay.
Just, copy paste.
Got it.
I'm about, when it comes to tech tools, I'm about as basic as they come. Proudly so.
When I was at Medium, I just loved that interface.
They were famous for that. That was their selling point.
I would say to Ev Williams, I even like a year ago, I ran into him at TED, and I said, Ev, your business plan is right in front of you. Just put a couple engineers on that and beef up that to do basic word processing stuff with one-click publishing to Medium, and it would be incredibly popular. There's nothing like it to come up with a beautiful document so simply as what they came up with at Medium.
I think he's aware of that because I remember when Medium started, that was one of the things they said. These CMSs that people are forced to use at other publications are so crappy. We wanted to make a good one. And so,
but it's only for publishing on Medium. They should make it should have made it so people can do their docs on it. I would produce, docs on it that I wasn't publishing, but I would, send to people, just in draft form and send them the link.
Well, I've never used it, but actually maybe I have, because you can just write an article on Medium, right? You don't have to go through any hoops. I feel like I might have used it. Jeff Jarvis loves it. I know a lot of people who use it and love it. Are you ready for the Esports Olympics? The International Olympic Committee has announced the official esports, and they're a little weird. This is Ollie Welsh writing for Polygon. The Olympic Esports Series 2023. They don't quite yet have esports in the Olympics, but often they do this as they're starting to move stuff into the Olympics. There will be a qualification this month, live finals in Singapore in June, open to amateur and professionals. But unlike other esports, most esports are MOBAs like League of Legends, Dota 2, maybe Fortnite. The International Olympic Committee is eschewing the esports, Ollie says, people actually watch for non-violent simulations of real-world sports games and activities. Just Dance is one of them. Gran Turismo is the driving one. They have an indoor cycling trainer called Zwift, Z-W-I-F-T. They have a sailing simulator called Virtual Regatta, Virtual Taekwondo, a mobile game called Tennis Clash, Konami's WBSC eBaseball Power Pros, and of course you can't have the Olympics without archery. They've added another mobile game called Tic Tac Bow to the esports and the IOC. I just can't wait until that's part of the Olympics.
Yeah, I have a funny story about something like this. So San Francisco hosted the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And as the host committee was getting ready to rumble, they hosted a day for potential sponsors, I think, something in Levi Stadium where the 49ers play. And I was moderating one of those panels. And we had like some media people. We had a video game a COO from EA Sports, and we had a former 49er player who was young, just had recently retired and was then in media. And we had Lynn Swann, who is a Hall of Fame receiver for the Steelers, who was like the MC for the day. So we get talking about esports, and I was just curious what the 49er thought, the guy who had recently retired. I said, hey, do you think that esports players are athletes? And he said, yeah, they're definitely athletes. In my book, it takes, coordination and competition, and you have to be the best. And the guy from EA Sports, he was like, oh, yeah, definitely. We believe that they're athletes. And then Lynn Swan was in the audience just sitting there. I was like, Mr. Swan, I'm curious what you think. And he gives me a look, and he walks out of the room. And I was just like, oh, no, I've just upset a Hall of Fame, football player, someone who I've looked up to as, a great athlete who's responsible for some of the most memorable plays in NFL history. And a few minutes later, Swan comes back onto the stage. He wasn't even sitting on the stage. He was in the audience. He comes onto the stage with the chair. He sets it down and he looks at me and takes the mic and just goes, they're not athletes. And that was it.
He was angry.
He was mad.
Mad as heck.
Exactly.
That's hysterical.
It was just a moment I'll never forget. Because he'd seen that this was a debate that was going to get going. And I think an old school athlete like him knew he was going to lose.
He was right.
Because this is obviously something that, more and more we're starting to see these esports players as athletes. Now, I'm still on Team Swan, but, I also think, I'm on the losing side of history here.
Chess was also one of the sports that they're going to look at. Chess.com will be the host for the esports games. And there's always, I played chess since high school. There's always been a debate. Well, our, chess players aren't athletes, but you have to be a top grandmaster. You've got to be pretty darn fit. All the super grandmasters work out constantly. Maybe they're not exactly moving when they're playing the game, but in order to think full concentration for 4.5 hours, you try it. It ain't easy.
One thing that chess has that a lot of Olympic sports don't have is that there's a winner and a loser.
That's true.
Right? And
it's head to head.
I personally don't think anything is a sport. It's depends on a bunch of grades. Right. That people hold up signs. And, it turns out it's always subject to.
It's too subjective.
Corruption. You could it's like the Supreme Court. You could pick how people are going to vote before the performer even gets to it, right? Unless they fall flat on their faces, it's up for grabs. So I feel that, the rest of them, it's exhibitions, right? And, you could say, well, it's like dancing, but dancing is actually kind of an Olympic sport now.
Yes,
so,
it is.
So basically to me, let's have winners and losers, and that's what athletics are all about.
Is this guy an athlete? That's the question we got to ask.
Not according to Lynn Swan.
That's Lynn Swan's image of an esports athlete. Exactly. All right, let's talk with the guy who wrote the book, Facebook, The Inside Story. Meta has been going through some big changes since you were embedded for 3 years. You got interviews with Zuckerberg, with Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl's gone now. First of all, we haven't talked since the book came out. What does Sheryl's departure from Facebook mean? You spent a lot of time talking to Sandberg. Right. She was kind of adult supervision is the sense I got.
Well, and that was in 2008. So, Mark in the meantime became an adult. And I think that also after Cambridge Analytica and where Sheryl, it was on Sheryl's watch. That was her part of the company where that stuff happened post-election. She was not as big a force in the company as she was earlier. And I feel it wasn't a surprise when she left. She's a brilliant executive in a lot of ways. It wasn't a surprise that at a certain point she decided, let me move on with my life.
I don't need this.
I always believe that, when she took that job, she said, I'm going to spend 5 years here. And a series of events, largely out of her control, kept extending that time that she spent there. First, she thought the perfect time to go out would be the company does a successful IPO. I've accomplished this, I could leave. The IPO actually was a disaster. People don't remember this. By the time then it got, recovered and it got back together, they figured out how to do mobile ads. Something tragic happened. Her husband died. She wasn't in a shape to go off for a new chapter. And when she was back with, all her passion, then the bad stuff happens. Post-election, Cambridge Analytica, and she didn't want to leave in the middle of that storm. So I think she had to wait to get past all of those things to be able to leave and say, well, it was time. I had my time here. I had my impact. She admits it was bittersweet because of the troubles that the company had, but she's off to do something else.
Mission accomplished. And yet, and maybe it's purely coincidence, since Sandberg's departure, Facebook seems to be wandering a little bit. They renamed themselves Meta. They refocused from being a social network to the metaverse.
Well, that was sort of an escape hatch for her too. When Mark said, "Okay, this is a different company now. We're based on the metaverse and virtual reality. That's our future." That's not Cheryl's wheelhouse. So she could, quite legitimately say, "I'm not. This is a journey that I'm not on board for. So I'm going to go up something else." We haven't seen what that something else is.
Well, she just got married, remarried. She's got a family. And if I were her, I wouldn't mind spending a little time with all that money.
Right. Well,
don't we think
true, but she's a pretty ambitious person.
Right.
Don't we think that Cheryl is responsible in some ways for the position that Meta finds itself in today, which is that it's floundering? And I'll just say that, she is part of what I've talked about as the over-financialization of tech, where tech companies are trying to get every, little cent out of their business and start to forget, what they were there to do, which was to solve problems and improve people's lives. And the fact that Apple's anti ad tracking transparency project, where people are able to block tracking on their pages, has worked so well, has been a product of, the fact that people were creeped out by what her ad division was doing, that they had to track every last little thing as opposed to sell more broader ad categories. And so now you have Meta in a position where, so many people have opted out that their tracking has effectively broken. And that's why they're handicapped against competitors.
They blame Apple for this and Apple's ATT.
Right. But it's also Apple did, of course, Apple facilitated it. But what inspired first of all, what inspired Apple's program to be so successful? And what inspired so many users to tell Apple, don't track me when you're on Facebook. Yeah. And to do that, and then of course, you sort of set the conditions for where this thing would work.
I wonder, though, what Facebook's future holds, because they're spending huge amounts of money, $10 billion or more a year, to create this metaverse. They seem to be turning their backs on the social network, but so do people, so do users. And it's not just a privacy issue. I think to some degree, you've written about this, Alex, it's the end of social in to some degree entirely. That people are turning to content sites. That was why TikTok, which isn't really social, it's really about content, and YouTube, and even now Twitter are becoming, places you go to look at stuff, not to post stuff, right?
That's right. Yeah, I have an episode of Big Technology Podcast with Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, coming up about this, where we talk about the homogenization of social media, how TikTok looks like YouTube, and YouTube looks like Instagram, and Instagram looks like Facebook, and Facebook looks like Twitter. And all of these sites are starting to look exactly the same. And that initial social media dream where you would get content from your friends, the stuff that they recommend, that's fallen by the wayside. So, this is obviously the main challenge that Facebook is going to have to navigate. It's going to be the product question. And, they have billions of users, so there's a good chance that they could hold their own against TikTok, or maybe TikTok gets banned like we spoke about. And that could be the solution. But yeah, they sort of moved away from their main product, which is social, which, I'm definitely in favor of big tech companies saying that our flagship product is not going to get us there tomorrow the way that it did today. But maybe the pivot was, more TikTok related stuff and less social related stuff. Maybe the pivot was not metaverse, right? I keep thinking that, we're just weeks away from Meta changing its name from Meta to AI. And deciding to
that's what I'm wondering. Did Meta make a bad bet? Did they bet on the wrong horse?
It depends on the time frame. I think over time they're going to be proven right on the metaverse.
Oh, interesting.
But in the short term, they won't. And how many years? If the metaverse is 30 years away versus 10, which I think is probably more like 30 years away versus 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10, then you're going to look really silly. Just, your flagship business is not going to be able to support that type of thing for that long of a time span.
Yeah, I think interesting. I think Meta is vying to be the general magic of the metaverse.
That's both good and bad. It depends which era of general magic you're talking about.
well, the era of general magic. I mean, it didn't succeed because it had everything right, but it was too soon.
Right.
And they're developing the tools of the metaverse way before it could be delivered, in a package where the masses are going to be able to use it. And Alex's point about there was a time about a year ago everyone was saying metaverse, and now it's AI, and I think AI is more real than the metaverse, and that's difficult.
And maybe AI helps the metaverse, right? Because AI could create like the intelligent non-player characters that all of a sudden makes you want to wander around some virtual world.
But Zuckerberg says endlessly that the metaverse is going to be a social experience. To me, I felt that Meta, Facebook, just left a lot of chips on the table about improving the social experience. If you look at what they've done almost nothing to really improve the experience that they first introduced and got billions of people to sign on to. So I feel that the creative energy of the company moved away from that vision of building the social graph and enhancing people's experience with other people that they knew. There's a lot of really simple things that they're still begging to be done on that service. You ever try to find someone you knew on Facebook, right? And you can't do it because like 100 people have that same name, and it's just not easy to do.
But there's a reason. There's a reason though they moved away from social. It's just because if you're eventually going to be content companies, right? Which these feeds they became content companies. The people or ordinary folks are just not going to be the ones that are going to be there to entertain you. It's going to be the AI generated folks, and it's going to be professional creators.
Yeah, but why be an entertainment company?
Well, that's the question is whether there was a choice or not. If you were going to be as big as you were, because the value came from the time spent on the newsfeed, and if you're just a utility like a phone book utility, then you're worth way less. So from a business standpoint, maybe it's just like not a prudent decision. But I could be wrong.
If you're worth billions of dollars, your job is to come up with something that you or I can't figure out to make that social experience valuable.
I think it's an overrating of people's ability to be interesting or desire to be interesting to others.
No, if people, you're spending the time with them. I don't spend my time with Bruce Springsteen. I can't. I could watch his videos on YouTube, but I enjoy being.
Yeah, but you're not. But you can't. Well, anyway, you can't.
He's not going to be as nice to me as my friends are.
You can watch him. You can watch him, just like you can listen to an album. But yeah, I think you're right, Stephen. So that means there's a gap. There's an opening for somebody to create a social network. Since Facebook
there are a number of places that they're saying, "Hey, we're going to fill this spot." Alex is right that if your appetite is so voracious, you need to become a different kind of company. But the fact is that Meta isn't in a great position to compete with TikTok and other company and YouTube in being an entertainment company. That's not their DNA, and as it turns out, they haven't even been able to successfully leverage their huge number of people to be able to wipe out these other companies.
Well, the worst thing you can do is be sort of caught in the middle, which means that you're a subpar entertainment company. Right. And a social company where you put updates of, crappy updates from people, or you so diminish the social side that people don't want to post anymore. And I think that's exactly where Meta is.
They're betwixt and between. You're right. They're neither nor. They're neither fish nor fowl. What an opportunity. I feel like the metaverse is not an opportunity. Apple is reportedly about to launch its VR headset in the next few months. And it's interesting because there was an article, I think in the Journal, suggesting that the designers said, no, it's not ready. You shouldn't release a VR headset. Wait till we can do AR, which is years away. and that Tim Cook and the management decided, no, we got to do this now. Let's take a break. When we come back, we could talk about that. We still haven't talked about Silicon Valley Bank, and I don't think that's over. I think you guys agree, so we'll talk about that as well. We've got lots to say, and two great people to talk about it with. Stephen Levy at stevielevy.com, editor-at-large at Wired, one of the great writers about technology for the last, 3 decades almost, yeah? Wow. And, of course, one of the new young bright lights of technology journalism, Big Technology's Alex Kantrowitz. Great to have you both. Our show today brought to you by Miro. We've been playing with Miro at TWiT and love it. We were in a situation, I think a lot of you are in, going from tab to tab in your browser, tool to tool on your toolkit, and meanwhile losing ideas with those context switches and leaving important information on the table. There's a better way. The problem is it's very hard for me to explain what it is, except to tell you it's called Miro, MIRO.com/podcast. Miro, well, on the face of it, it's a collaborative visual whiteboard, a place you and your team can go to brainstorm, to work together, to collaborate, brings all of your great work together, no matter where you are in the world and no matter what time, since you can go in at night and somebody else can go in the next day, whether you're working from home in a hybrid workspace, it all comes together one place online, that Miro. But to say it's a whiteboard, I feel like almost diminishes what Miro is. Miro is amazing because it can do almost anything, which makes it hard for me to describe. We use Miro on Ask the Tech Guys for our show rundown. Once you start using Miro, you're probably not going to want to ever do a meeting without Miro's timers. Maybe the best thing to do is to point you to the Miroverse. This is a collection of templates you can use created by Miro users, people who work at Atlassian, the UK government, Zendesk, all over the world. Here's a from Stephen Sampson-Jones, who works for the UK government. He's the head of Agile Delivery and has made quite a few, I think, fascinating templates, including the Treehouse of Horror retrospective, a retrospective of Marvel comic books, a retro arcade, a Harry Potter and SpongeBob retrospective. This guy is, I think, a good guy to check out because it shows you what you can do with Miro. With Miro, you can integrate with many, many other services. For instance, we use Zapier with Miro so that we can trigger actions that put stuff into Miro, like questions we're getting from the email or the chat room or videos. It's an infinite collaborative whiteboard that's a perpetual space. You can drag in any kind of data or content, and nothing is lost or forgotten. You can create templates, of course, but it's also open and freeform. So your ideas can grow and expand. They're not limited. It is an amazing tool. It covers a breadth of use cases, visual assets. You can present findings. You can run brainstorms with cross-functional teams. The Miro timers and icebreakers and brainstorming tools make it really much better to have a conference call. You can build out, if you, let's say you're doing a new product, build out your product vision on a Miro board. Brainstorm with sticky notes or comments or live reactions. There's a voting tool. There's a timer. Express yourself in creative ways. Bring the whole group together around one idea. The point is there's one place you can all go to see what's going on, to update it, to contribute. And you can do it in any way you like. With a Kanban board, if you're agile, if you want wireframes, do that. You can draw with a pen tool. You can paste in images. You want to do a mood board? Easiest place in the world. Want to do mock-ups? No problem. Miro users love it. 80 hours per user per year saved by streamlining conversations, cutting down on meetings. Miro gives your team the chance to always stay connected to real-time information. And it gives project managers and product leads a bird's eye view of the whole product. You can zoom in or out to ensure nothing slips through the cracks. The only problem I have is, how do I describe what it can do? It can do so much. It's a whiteboard, but that doesn't even scratch the surface. It's anything you want it to be, everything you need. The Miro integrations mean it works with everything you're already using. They've got apps for iOS and Android and Windows and Mac. I just think it's fantastic. Miro.com/podcast. Give it a try. Miro.com/podcast. We're going to make that easy because your first 3 boards, 1, 2, 3 boards, are free. Your first 3 boards for free. Start working better. Miro, Miro.com/podcast. And do take a look at the Miroverse, because that's a really great way of seeing what you can do. I mean, it's limitless. It's amazing. Miro.com/podcast. We thank them so much for sponsoring our show. We appreciate that, Miro. We thank you for trying them out. And if you do, please use that address, because that's how they know you saw it here. Miro.com/podcast. Earlier today on Ask the Tech Guys, I likened the Silicon Valley Bank debacle to a game of Jenga, where the FDIC, the Fed, have pulled out one little piece of wood, but now the whole tower is kind of swaying, and we're waiting to see what happens next. Both of you have written about it. Stephen, we'll start with your story. The ugly lessons of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse. One of the stories that came out, I think today, is that there have been intimations that they were taking too much risk for years, that they've even been under investigation for some time now. What do we learn? What have we learned from this? And is this going to be a problem going forward? Credit Suisse now is kind of shaking. Right.
Well, we learned a few things, and none of them, as my headline reflects, are pretty. One thing that struck me was how the bank really operated as a sort of a cheerleader for the whole ecosystem of founders and funding, and they threw parties. They had a lot of clients in the wine industry, so they would sort of cross-pollinate, those with the tech people and share the great vintage wines with them. And you go into their offices. They, some of the executives of the bank would have wine fridges, and and I mentioned saying, is this sort of behavior really what you want from your fiduciaries, right? When I think of a bank I want to trust, I think of like the guy who hired Mary Poppins, right?
A banker, yeah.
A banker,
with a
yes.
bowler and a tightly furled umbrella. Yeah.
Yeah, and he says, I know where everything is, and at 6:20 I'm going to come home and then going to be greeted, and that's sort of the boring kind of person you want in charge of your finances. So these people who say they embrace risk all the time, as it turns out, they weren't cognizant of this kind of risk. It was avoidable. Any idiot knows what the limit is in what you're insured about. And then when it happens, they sort of do a 180 from their normal point of view of saying, government stay out of it, and saying, hey, the government should now forget about this limit and, go from $250,000 to reimbursement to infinity, because otherwise our payrolls can be lost. Well, this is an industry that's laid off over 100,000 people, right? And the fate of those people is sort of shrugged off, and now all of a sudden, needing a payroll and having people not paid for a day or two is going to collapse the economy. So it displayed sort of the insularity and hypocrisy, I guess, of the Valley, and kind their rush to really create a bank run from this place where they loyally supported for a number of years. Showed that this one for all for one community really fell apart when the bullets started flying.
Yeah. But you would agree that the Fed and the FDIC did the right thing to backstop all those deposits, or no?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that maybe there was a way to do that where they could have maybe had a much higher limit, or said at a certain point that all your deposits aren't guaranteed for this day. But meantime, by then, things have gotten to the point where, they were saying, well, the whole economy is at risk if people deposits aren't going to be protected. And the fact is, you talk about hallucinations in GPT-4, the whole monetary system is kind of a hallucination. That, everyone sort of accepts the fact that if nothing happens, if people don't pull out their money right away, banks are okay. But the fact is that, if things could turn on a dime, and we could be facing giant problems in the economy because we all of a sudden we abandon our shared agreement not to pull out money from the bank.
Right. Alex, your article talks about, and you mentioned this earlier, the over-financialization of tech and yes, the SVB backlash. What do you mean? What's that all about?
Well, look, one of the things that I saw that really sort of made my antennas go up was that there was, the public largely supported the bailout, but there was a loud enough and big enough chunk of the public who were willing to let the bank fail that it was worth examining who they were and why and what has happened to tech, that it began as this underdog industry, one that, was there fighting the establishment, one that you could root for, that was fun, that everyone would support, basically, unless you were like the establishment, would support, keeping vibrant and keeping healthy. And why would anyone then say that, okay, well, we should have these companies fail? They're just, rich bastards anyway.
But that's what's happened. But look at Elon Musk as a perfect example.
Right.
The transition from, the Stark Industries genius transforming by being a rebel, by being one of the crazy ones, the people who think different, changing the world, making the world a better place, to just another batshit crazy billionaire.
Right. So look, I think that it goes beyond Elon, though, and this is the point that I was making in the story, and we talked about it on the show also, is that tech has been, like much of the economy, over-financialized, right? Which is that it has in some, not everyone, of course, but some companies have just tried to squeeze every ounce of money onto the balance sheet, no matter, not really paying attention to the cost. One example, which we know, is that DoorDash, right, would take tips that it would get for Dashers and then count that towards its minimum payment to the Dashers. So they would never see the tip. And I have to say that, like, when you do when you do that stuff, there is a downstream risk. People are going to see it eventually. And I think you started to see it when, everybody, in the US at least, knows an Amazon worker, knows a Dasher, knows an Uber driver, right? And when that squeezing happens, there's a political cost to it, which you end up having people who are saying, okay, like, let the bastards fail. And, they don't care, like, necessarily, this was the tech's argument, right? Your money's not going to go to DoorDashers. But what they're saying is, well, the whole DoorDash system is corrupt. Now, DoorDash, of course, has fixed that, right? After some press attention.
Because they got caught.
Yeah. But it exists all over.
Right.
And I think that, for those of us who root for tech, I root for tech to be a strong industry. But what people want from tech is that it provides all this benefit it can provide through computing, through technology, in a way that isn't needlessly extractive. And the fact that some cordons of the industry have become needlessly extractive has cost so much political will that there was a very vocal group of folks who said, let it fail. And in fact, when it was coming into the White House, right, with discussions of like when this thing should be bailed out, it took the whole weekend before Biden eventually gave in.
He was aware, I'm sure, of the political backlash of quote, bailing out.
Billionaire bailout.
Yeah.
That was what he was worried about. And it doesn't have to be that way, because at its best, tech is for the little person. And that's all the whole thing. And I talked in my story a little bit about New York Tech Meetup. I don't know if either of you have been there, but it was this amazing meetup. It still goes on to some extent. But at its height in the early 2010s, we'd have local startups come in and just kind of show off what they built. And it was right after the financial crisis. So you started to have some people from Wall Street seep in to try to get second careers inside tech. And whenever you spoke about your finances, your VC fundings, the whole place would boo and people would shout, get to the demo, right? And that's sort of what I think, going back to that spirit of get to the demo, show us the tech. Like, I think that's what we need to get back to in some ways.
To some degree, this is what happens in all industries, right? I mean, in the early days of of oil, the wildcatters and the crazy guys digging oil wells and having gushers. And eventually it's successful. It monetizes. It's a bunch of fat cats with monocles and cigars. That's what happens with any successful industry, right? Stephen, I'm sorry.
For many years, the overwhelming narrative of tech was David versus Goliath. And then at a certain point in the past few years, it's changed. It's changed to the Icarus myth.
Too close to the sun.
Yeah.
Its wings are melting. Yeah, I mean, Alex, you make your living kind of talking about big technology and the threat in some ways that the big technology can pose to all of the rest of us. What's the solution?
I mean, it's a simple solution, right? Look, tech is big business now. No denying that, right?
Because it's successful.
Exactly, it's successful. And I do think that, look, I think once you saw the first IPOs, you saw the first public companies, you saw the first $1 trillion company, that became so alluring, right? For CEOs, it became, the mark was not what your company can do, but the mark was what was your net worth? What was your market cap? How much had you raised? These all became the successful parts of the successful markers in the tech industry. And obviously that's what shifted the industry's perception among other people. And so I think it's very simple. I think it's step back, focus again on the customer, focus again on tech. And again, get to the demo. I mean, let's see this. And that's sort of
let's see the tech.
And it's interesting because we're having this amazing moment right now where we're seeing so many cool things happen with AI. And in some ways, tech is getting back to the demo in that area, right? We're going from 0 to 1, not 1 to, N or whatever it is. And that's exciting to me. But I do think that, I think that it's just something that the tech industry needs to keep in mind, and maybe it needs new spokespeople, right? I mean, that's another thing that we're hearing about now. Tech has been represented by some very loud, obnoxious people, people like Mark Andreessen, who I don't think really puts the best image for, on the tech industry. And I would actually say his entire firm. And I think like right now, a lot of people, who've been silent in the tech industry are starting to speak up and kind of talk about what the industries, what the sector's values are. And I think that's a good thing.
So is it, Stephen, though, a little bit just nostalgia? I mean, you and I both remember the Homebrew Computer Club. You were, covered the early days of the MIT hackers. They were a rough and ready, antisocial band of misfits, as was, I guess, Apple in the early days. Those days aren't coming back.
Not in the same way. But there is a thriving startup culture where people do a reset. Now, a startup in the 2020s isn't the same as a startup in the late 1970s or early 80s. There's a pathway, and like a lot of the founders have their eyes on the prize from the get-go, right? Y Combinator, when it started in 2005, gave $5,000 plus $5,000 for each founder to the company as his stake investment. The investment now for each company in Y Combinator is $500,000.
Yeah.
Right. And, they're on a path to fail big or get big. So that is different. Yet, I think that there's going to be a lot of, 10, 20 years from now, the companies that we're going to be talking about are companies that are starting now or maybe haven't even started yet.
Also, one thing that I think is worth pointing out is that, of course, we're not going to go back to those days, but we know that it's a political risk, right, to be where we are today, right? It almost sent the whole industry into a tailspin because of the image, the billionaire bailout.
Yeah.
And that is the issue, right? And so once that political risk is realized, and I really think it is, like I think this has been a wake-up call to many in Silicon Valley about what could happen to them, based off of public sentiment. I think that might lead to change. In other words, we're not going to go back to hobbyists, and we probably won't have less funding, but we will definitely go back to a time where we didn't have this over-financialization of the economy, at least that's of the sector, and at least that's my hope.
Should we break up these big tech companies like we did Standard Oil or Ma Bell.
They'll probably do a good enough job on their own of
breaking themselves up.
Either breaking themselves up or being outcompeted. I mean, look at what's happened to Meta just this year, right? Just in the past year. Look at what happened to Meta, right? This challenge from TikTok. Look at what happened to Google. This challenge from OpenAI and Microsoft. So I really believe that competition will do the better job in terms of humbling these companies than the government coming in and saying you can have Amazon retail, but you can't have Amazon Web Services.
And Leo, from, being, like around so much that, we go into waves of success and, and cold periods and busts and booms. But one thing that does not vary is, the arrow of the technology itself. It just keeps getting better. Innovations keep coming. There's never like a downtime for the technology improving. And, we're seeing that now in AI, it's apparent to us, but there's always going to be something coming along to build on the previous advances, and the innovation of tomorrow is going to go faster because we've had all the previous innovations. So we're arguing about the state of whether it's big companies, small companies, do we need different people? But one constant is that technology keeps getting better and better. And that's what's exciting, and that's what's thrilling, and that's what's scary about our world. Yeah,
I agree. It's the thing that makes it most interesting to cover, to look at, and to speculate about. And, I have to say that it's not been good for a huge amount of money to flow into tech because that attracts the greedy. It also attracts the scammers. And you see, NFTs and Bitcoin and, a lot of scams. Look, Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, pushing Web3, which is a blatant, grab for the free and open internet. I see companies like Spotify and Amazon going after our little corner of the world, RSS-based podcasting. But I agree with you, Stephen. I think in the long run, the human spirit, there's always going to be some little person who has a great idea who is going to change the world. It may not be Elizabeth Holmes, but there's always going to be somebody like that, I think. Yeah.
Maybe that person got laid off by a big company this year.
Yeah, even better, right? And is forced to go back to the garage and find something better. Another 10,000 jobs leaving Facebook. They fired 11,000 in the fall, and now they're saying we're going to fire another 10,000. Plus, we're not going to fill 5,000 open positions. So the net of that is, what is that? 26,000 jobs gone from Facebook. Any other industry, that'd be a death blow. So yeah, maybe some of those people will go on. It's hard, and I feel for you. I'm hearing from a lot of people who are out of work, who think that maybe podcasting can help them. I just want to say it can't. But please don't become a podcaster. That's the wrong direction. But I think that's right, that those people maybe now are going to have the stimulus, the spur they need to create something exciting and new. And boy, the way AI is happening, I'll go through a list of some of the AI startups that were formed this week alone. And in a way, that's why I guess it's good that there's venture capital. There is money available because there are people with big bags of money who don't want to invest in the stock market. They think that if they could just find that next big thing, that's the best place for them to make money. That's not a bad thing, is it, Alex?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
Right. And I also think, look, right now, if you write AI on your term sheet or whatever it is, you'll probably get money. 7 VCs that will sign on. There's money is harder to come by now, but it's definitely there. And it is a moment of opportunity.
Because it does take money.
Yeah, of course. During COVID, during the worst part of COVID is when I decided to leave BuzzFeed and start my own company.
That's right.
And this is generally the moment where you start to have people who are like, okay.
How's that worked out for you?
That thing. I'm very happy.
Yay.
And people are like, and look, still a lot of room to grow. But, the fact that was the moment that pushed me out and said, do this, start your own thing.
Yeah.
That's happening across the economy now, especially within tech. And by the way, when they get that money, they won't feel entitled to it. They'll know they had to work for it.
Yep.
And that will lead to better companies, more sound management, and a true gratefulness, I think, from founders that they're able to do what they do.
Alex Kantrowitz, host of the Big Technology Podcast, the author of Always Day One, and, of course, the Substack, bigtechnology.com. Great to have you. Same, Stephen Levy. One last break. We'll wrap things up in just a little bit, but first I got to tell you about our sponsor, Collide. They're doing something really, really interesting. We all talk about zero trust architectures these days when it comes to security. The idea that anybody in the network should be treated as an adversary. But there's a place where zero trust falls apart. And that's where Collide is really going to make a difference. They're a device trust solution that ensures unsecured devices cannot access your apps. If you're an Okta user, you're going to want this. They can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance by patching one of the major holes in zero trust architectures, device compliance. So your identity provider, is saying, well, only known devices can log into apps. But just because a device is known doesn't it mean it's in a secure state. Just ask LastPass, right? There was a very determined attacker who found the 4 DevOps guys who had keys to the S3 buckets. Those DevOps guys, when they worked from home, were using a laptop, one of them using a laptop that had Plex on it that hadn't been patched in 3 years. That is a source of ultimate danger to a company. And in the case of LastPass, it could be the end of the line, all because of this one little problem. Yeah, the DevOps guy was known. He was logging in. But what they didn't know was that he had an insecure app running on his machine. Plenty of the devices in your fleet probably shouldn't be trusted. Maybe they're running out of date OS versions. Maybe they've got unencrypted credentials lying around. They've got an old browser. Maybe they're running Plex from 3 years ago. If a device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, because the agent's what finds all of that, they just can't get in. It can't access the organization's SaaS apps. It can't access the other resources. The device user can't log in to your company's cloud apps until, this is the best part, they fixed the problem on their end. You don't do it, they do it. That's what the Collide agent does. It says, hey, wait, you can't log in. And you know why? Because your browser's out of date. It's so simple. A device is blocked, employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser, it tells the employee and the end user remediates it. Without overwhelming your IT team, your fleet will be driven to 100% compliance. Isn't that beautiful? Without Collide, IT teams have no way to solve these compliance issues. Hybrid work, remote work, on-site work, and it's all mushed together. With Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet, and it's truly cross-platform, Mac, Windows, and Linux. And because Collide ties device compliance into the authentication process, this is really the way to do it. When the user logs in with Okta, Collide will alert them to compliance issues, prevents unsecured devices from logging in, and they get a user to fix it. That's awesome. It's security you can feel good about. Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of their product. Your users will know it. Your IT department will love it. It's a really, really, really good. To sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. You know you need this. Go to collide.com/twit to learn more or book a demo. KOLIDE, collide.com/twit. It's just really the obvious solution, the right way to do it. Collide.com/twit. Thank you, Collide, for supporting us. They've been with us for a long time, but thank you for supporting Collide by going to their website. And when you go to that address, collide.com/twit, you support us because then they know you saw it here. And that's a good thing. We had a great week this week. Boy, we had a lot to talk about, and we've even made a little mini movie for you to watch so you can catch up. Watch this. What would your last words be, Jeff? You got to think about these things.
Mine would be...
What goes on your tombstone?
Somebody in the Discord, Mashed Potato, says it should be another twit is in the can. Yeah. Good. That's pretty good. That might be it.
Yeah.
Previously on TWiT. Home Theater Geeks.
On today's Home Theater Geeks, we're going to talk about Sony's 2023 TV lineup. So stay tuned.
This week in Google.
OpenAI announced ChatGPT-4 yesterday. Within hours, there were 500 new startups.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-boggling. Have you changed how you write?
I have.
Are you getting more wacky?
Writing, a little more colorful, a little less robotic. My prediction is that this is eventually going to be where writing goes.
Hands-on photography.
Someone asked me about using their phone like a DSLR. Well, why would you do that? And should you really do that? I have some thoughts.
Tech News Weekly.
We talked to TechCrunch's own Alex Wilhelm about, yes, Silicon Valley Bank. It is time to talk about SVB. What's going on?
I feel like whenever something breaks, I get to come on your fine show. It'd be fun to come on a week when nothing was happening and just kick it.
Boy.
TWiT.
I'm just saying, like, we don't have to wait for a crisis to have me on.
When we just want to hang out, we will contact you and we'll bring you on for the Hangout episode.
Sold.
The good news about tech is there's always a crisis. There's always a disaster looming around the corner. I hope you enjoyed your week on TWiT, and I hope you'll keep watching all week long. And I hope you'll join Club TWiT if you're not a member. $7 a month. You get unencumbered shows, no ads at all. You get access to the Discord, which Alex and I were talking about before the show. He's thinking about that for big technology, and I have to say it's the best thing we've ever done. You also get special shows we don't put out anywhere else, like Home Theater Geeks, brought back thanks to the club. $7 a month. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. That's enough said. Enough said. By the way, TikTok has announced they are adding a new feed dedicated to science and technology. Just trying to say, see, we're good for young people. You're going to learn about finance and science and stuff on TikTok, or, watch my son's channel and learn how to make a sandwich. Good news, I guess, according to the federal agents who have arrested a Peekskill, New York man who ran a dark web data breach site called BreachForums. Pom-Pom Purin is alleged.
It's a great name.
Yeah,
it's an epic name.
Pom-Pom.
He's only 21 years old, by the way.
He's a kid. He's still in school.
Yeah, he was born in the 2000s. That shows you.
Oh my God. His real name is maybe I won't say his real name because it's all alleged, right? Although apparently he confessed when they arrested him. He said, "You got me." Charged with a single count of conspiracy to commit access device fraud. BreachForums hosts the stolen databases of more than 1,000 companies and websites. Pom-Pom Purin's profile, I love saying that, on BreachForums describes him as boss man. And according to the FBI agents, he admitted, that's me. I own and operate it. So I don't know. He has been released on bond. He graduated from high school in 2021.
Congrats, Pom-Pom.
Nice
if I was
job.
a 21-year-old hacker mastermind, I would definitely go by boss man on the site. Just have to say.
Wow. Anyway, I guess, another one bites the dust, I guess. Apparently, BreachForums was one of the most active places hackers went to buy and sell leaked information. Honestly, I think you should go after the companies that are leaking the information, but that's just me. FCC has finally ordered phone companies to block scam text messages. What? You mean they weren't before?
God bless them.
God bless them.
This is here, like the rise in spam text messages going up from 3,000. The article you have that complaints to the FTC about these rose from 3,300 in 2015 when they were already annoyed to 18,900 per year. So like 5x what we were getting in 2022. And it's probably worse now. I mean, this is what, if we're going to have one government do one thing, pick up the trash, and number 2, end robotext.
And fill potholes. That's number 3.
Yes,
I don't think there's anybody listening. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't gotten a text, random text from a number you don't know saying hi. Or a lot of them are like, I got one the other day that said, "Hey, that was a great round of golf. I'm going to be in town again. When do you want to play again?" You might say, "Well, that doesn't sound like a scam. That just sounds like some guy." We got a good one now. Our boss, the CEO of TWiT, has somebody's impersonating her to our employees, sending out messages saying, "I need to talk to you. Call me." And almost all of these end up, you get in a conversation. I would say, for instance, what brand of golf? I don't even play golf. And he'd say, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. But you seem like a nice person. What's your name? Leo. What's yours? John. And then you get in a conversation. Actually, usually if I'm Leo, it's going to be Sally. And you get in a little conversation, and won't be too long before they offer you a great investment in cryptocurrencies.
There's a great Twitter comedian, I forget his name right now, but he posted screenshots of these messages, and he goes forward with like the first conversation, the first back and forth, and he says, they say, hey, so you seem like a nice person. He goes, they're like, what's your name? And he goes like, okay, here's my credit card information.
Yeah, just take it. Take it. I know what you want, and I've got it. Wow. Well, I didn't know it was illegal. It is now. So just the rule requires blocking of text, and the phone companies have to do this, from invalid and unused numbers. Okay.
Maybe they can do political campaigns next.
A rundown of
popular ones.
ChatGPT appearances. Carrot Weather, the snark weather. They're going to have ChatGPT do the snark going forward. Let's see. Google has announced, as I mentioned, AI features. Why is, by the way, in Docs, where are we? Facebook's large language model, LLM, I think they called theirs Llama. That's right, Llama. Everybody's got a play on LLM. It was leaked on 4chan, and people have written interfaces, and now you can use it. Why haven't we seen Facebook's use of this at all? Are they just like, is there attention elsewhere? Or are they looking at Microsoft saying that didn't go so well, maybe we shouldn't do it?
They have tried. They're working on it. They're working on it. I mean, interestingly, I read about this. Quora uses OpenAI technology for something they're doing now. Where Quora is about connecting people to answer questions. Now they're going to connect people with robots to answer questions. There's an app called Poe run by Quora where you ask your question, instead of a human answering it, it'll be
I think that's probably always been the problem with Quora, is more questioners than answerers. So that kind of makes sense that you would give it. Oh, I have to log in with my phone number to get.
Yeah, but the thing is that it was always about which human could come up with the best answer. So sometimes you would say, well, what does Larry Page like to work with? And someone would say, this is what Larry Page is like to work with. But instead, you can get a robot saying, oh, here's what Larry Page is like to work with. But the robot,
has no idea, right?
Yeah.
It seems like the end of Quora for me. If this is hopefully just a side project, but if it becomes anything more, that's a disaster for this company.
Interesting. Yeah, because really they are kind of reliant on people.
I talked to Adam D'Angelo, who used to be the CTO of Facebook, by the way.
Oh,
and he was a partner with Mark Zuckerberg in an AI-based program when they were in high school.
Oh, well, that's the thing. I mean, this is not, like I said at the beginning, this is nothing unknown, nothing new. Any company could theoretically do it. So here's Poe. What question should I ask Poe?
What's Larry Page like to work with?
What is Larry Page like to work with? Good question. As an AI language model, I do not have personal experience working with Larry Page, but I can tell you he's known for being a brilliant and innovative leader in the tech industry, known for cutting-edge technology and promoting a culture of innovation and creativity. However, it's important to note individual experiences may vary. But this is Sage. They also have ChatGPT-4. They also have Claude Plus. I don't know who Claude Plus is.
That's Anthropic.
That's what?
Anthropic's.
So these are different engines.
Yeah.
Ah. This is actually smart, although I note that even though I entered from Quora, it's at Poe.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. How do I make a tasty ham sandwich? Let's see how much trouble my son is in. To make a tasty ham sandwich, you need bread, sliced ham, cheese, lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise. It's fairly accurate. You can also add pickles, onions, or avocado to customize your sandwich. Well,
ham and avocado. Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's not good, is it? Where is the best bagel in New York City? Now, this you both would be interested in. No personal experience, but he recommends Russ and Daughters, the iconic shop on the Lower East Side. Been there?
Mm-hmm.
Since 1914. See, I didn't even know that. I know H&H. That's the number 3 on the list. Huh. That's because I'm an Upper West Side kind of guy. Absolute Bagels in Morningside Heights, which is where I was born, known for its affordable prices and delicious bagels. Would you New Yorkers concur? How about if I say in Brooklyn?
Yeah, look, I mean,
you don't even go over the bridge ever. I know. It's
yeah, Brooklyn is tough to leave, but also like New York, the pizza and the bagel. The thing is that like the thing that's great about them is they're high quality wherever you go. So like if you go for like your local place or you go to one of these like top bagel places, I don't think the delta is that large. Like you're probably just as good going to your corner bagel shop. But I'm curious what they say about Brooklyn.
All right. Where can I get the best bagel in Brooklyn? This is very specific user service right now. I should give him your, are you in Flatbush? Where are you? You're in the Bagel Hole in Park Slope. Frankel's. Oh, yeah. In Greenpoint, Frankel's. Terrace Bagels in Windsor Terrace. And Tompkins Square Bagels, which is in Williamsburg.
The one thing I can say for sure from speaking with this chatbot through you, Leo, so thank you, is that I will be getting bagels tomorrow morning. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Making me hungry.
See, I like Tompkins Square, but I get them at Tompkins Square. I didn't really realize that they had a Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's weird to have Tompkins Square in Brooklyn. But okay, I'm not going to say anything. GM.
I had a Tompkins Square bagel this morning.
Well, there you go. See, Poe knew. GM wants to bring ChatGPT to drivers. General Motors, which manufactures Chevrolet, Cadillac, Buick, and GMC trucks, working on a virtual personal assistant that uses AI beyond ChatGPT. It'll use Azure, Microsoft's cloud service. When? I don't know. Here's an example. If you get a flat tire, ask the car to explain how to change it.
Yeah, this actually sounds, I was initially ready to make fun of it, but like asking it to change your car or like when you see your engine light on and you're able to say, hey,
what's that mean?
What's going on with my engine light? And it can talk to you. That's cool. The one thing I worry about is that these bots still hallucinate so much that if it tells you the wrong thing and you drive off, the side of the road
that
because
means
your
more.
tires
You need
actually
more kerosene in the tank. Go get some kerosene because you're out. See that little oil thing? That's a kerosene can.
Yeah. That would be bad, right?
That would be bad.
Don't worry about that light.
That's mine. That's what I'm going to get.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about that.
Fine.
Don't worry about that. Just what we need. Hallucinating weather, hallucinating cars, hallucinating bagels. Google's working on AI for ultrasound diagnosis and cancer therapy. What I'd really like to know is when are they going to put something like ChatGPT or Google's Bard into the voice assistants? When can Amazon's Echo get, Chatty or Google Assistant or even Siri?
Well, there was a story about that the other day. I forget where I saw it, but it noted that that Siri and Alexa, they're not based on this part of technology. So they put a lot into part of technology that had been eclipsed. They thought that they would do this limited thing. They weren't doing these open-ended chats. And instead,
so it was almost if-then statements. It was almost completely deterministic.
And they were thinking people would order like buy stuff on it. That was the point.
They were hoping.
Right.
Yeah.
So it turns out that now that they have to go back to the square one.
But I've also thought about this, and it could get annoying if these things start to have the ability to talk like the same way that a ChatGPT does or a Bing bot does, because those bots are pretty loquacious, and it's fine to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fine to read it. It's like, all right, you send me like 7 paragraphs of text. I'm going to just scan it. But could you imagine your Google Home? I'm not saying the A word because I'm going to set her off now.
Couldn't you, though, say,
Google Home,
as the programmer, limit yourself to one sentence, please? I mean,
but
don't make it
even
chatty.
now. Oh my God, these things like even the echo.
Did
right
you
now,
know?
You say one
I
thing
can
to it and
also. It's like, no, shut up.
I'm like, oh my
Well,
God.
there
Can you play the
there
song?
there'll probably be people who really like, people who live alone who really might enjoy the conversation.
As I get
That would be
older,
great.
I think I'd like a nice little Echo Silver that would have a conversation with me about the good old days.
Well, that's coming. That will definitely. There will be products that will do that for sure.
And we've got these synthesized voices that sound pretty darn good. I could have people talk to me from my earlier life. I could have
hang out with Bruce
celebrities
Springsteen.
hang out with the boss. Now the boss can be your buddy.
It costs $5,000 to talk to him.
If Ticketmaster runs it, almost certainly. Stephen Levy, what a pleasure having you. Stephen's latest is, of course, Facebook, The Inside Story, but go to StephenLevy.com. He's got many wonderful books. And if you haven't read The Hackers, what's the subtitle of that? Something at the Revolution, I think, right?
Heroes.
Heroes.
The computer revolution.
Yeah. Richard Stallman and the MIT hackers, and it's what a great book. Really great. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Stephen. I think it was you that said you do, not like slow food, you do slow journalism. But you're doing a weekly column. Ain't that slow?
Yeah. I had to ramp up the cadence there. But
it's such a pleasure to talk to you, as always. You too, Alex. Alex Kantrowitz, host of the Big Technology Podcast, the Big Technology Newsletter, bigtechnology.com. And, of course, don't forget his book, Always Day One, which is not just about Amazon, is it? Or is it?
Right. No, it has all 5 of the big tech companies in there, including an interview with Zuckerberg. I think people would like it. And then, thanks for shouting out the podcast. We have Kevin Systrom coming on this week, and then Palmer Luckey.
Best guests. Palmer Luckey, really?
Coming on, founder of Oculus, coming on in a week and a half. So it's on a Big Technology podcast on every podcast app. So
you're willing to get people on that like Blake Lemoine and Palmer Luckey that I might be scared to have on.
Yeah,
you're brave.
Part of the fear is part of the adrenaline rush that you get from doing it. So
I went on a road trip with Palmer Luckey once.
What?
Nice.
Where to?
Texas. The Texas border.
To see what?
To see they had an installation of their
I remember that
technology on the border. I read the first big story about Anduril.
After he sold Oculus to Facebook.
After he got booted from Facebook.
Whatever. He Anduril, which was like a surveillance technology for people crossing the border, right?
Well, that was the first use, as something to monitor the border, a smart wall kind of thing. And so we went to this ranch this guy had where people were crossing the border and were able to use, he sent someone down into the Rio Grande Valley, and we tracked it, and we had a drone. It was a lot of fun. Palmer Luckey really loves Whataburgers.
So who doesn't love Whataburgers?
Yeah, we had fun. Actually, I enjoyed the trip.
Oh, interesting. I'm very grateful that both you and Alex are willing to talk to people that I kind of just don't want to know. So, because you get the stories. You get the stories, and that's what matters. Thank you both for being here. Thanks to all of you for listening.
Thank you.
We do TWiT every Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC. You can watch live at live.twit.tv, chat live at irc.twit.tv. That's open to all, or in our Club TWiT Discord. All you have to do is pay $7 a month to get access to the best dang Discord ever and all the other benefits. After the fact, on-demand versions of the show available at the website, twit.tv. There's a YouTube channel dedicated to the video from This Week in Tech, so you can watch video, you can listen to audio, and, of course, probably the easiest thing to do while you're looking for Alex's Big Technology Podcast, maybe subscribe to TWiT as well in your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Another TWiT is in the can.
This
Bye-bye.
is amazing.